Chapter 3572. Moreover, Hu Yufeng had already made it very clear that Kang Mingming's promotion would only be delayed for a month. Humph, we'll see. Kang Mingming scolded angrily. Zhong Pingliang, who was beside him, also secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He was forced to choose Kang Mingming, otherwise he wouldn't be able to go undercover. He was really afraid that Kang Mingming would be elected smoothly. After the voting, the newcomers of the three pavilions returned to their respective caves, but they didn't leave. Instead, they waited excitedly for the steward to give them the most important benefit of the welcome pavilion: 1 piece of spiritual jade per month. 1 piece of spiritual jade per month, this is the rule of our welcome pavilion. When I call your name, come up one by one to receive it. Meng Jiuguang's gaze swept across everyone, and when his gaze swept across Lin Yi and the other two, he deliberately paused, and a trace of a sinister smile flashed across his face. 15 pieces of spiritual jade were spread out on a piece of red cloth one by one, sparkling and white. Even from a distance of a few feet, everyone could feel the lingering spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It was pure and rich, and even these sky-class masters who had cultivated for many years couldn't help but show a covetous expression. Even Lin Yi, after seeing these spiritual jades full of essence, was slightly dazed. His previous guess was right, the nature was indeed similar to the energy stones in the secular world, but the two were worlds apart just from the appearance alone, not to mention the density of the spiritual energy inside. When one's strength reached the late stage of sky class, the energy stones in the secular world could at most assist in cultivation, but these spiritual jades could be used to assist in breaking through to the foundation realm of sky class. The difference between the two was obvious. However, these spiritual jades also differed in size. The largest was the size of an adult's fist, and the smallest was only comparable to an egg. The difference between the two was at least double. Of course, most of the spiritual jades were about the same size. Meng Tong! Meng Jiuguang directly picked the largest spiritual jade and handed it to Meng Tong. The latter, on the other hand, waved the spiritual jade in front of Lin Yi as if he was showing off before walking to the side happily. After that, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongcai's expressions changed as they watched Meng Jiuguang distribute the larger spiritual jades to the other rookies. Needless to say, the smallest 3 pieces of spirit jade would definitely belong to the 3 of them. Indeed, the spiritual jades that Lin Yi and the other 2 obtained in the end were not particularly large. Lin Yi's was the smallest. Even if the 3 of them added up, they might not be able to compare to Meng Tong's piece. Hee hee. Consider yourselves lucky this time. The smallest spiritual jade is at least the size of a chicken's egg. Next time, I'll spend some time to go to the storeroom and pick a few smaller ones. I'll let you know who's in charge here. Meng Jiuguang looked at the 3 complacently. He laughed heartily without any scruples and swaggered away. Without Su Lingcheng's support, he did not dare to go overboard. After all, although he was not afraid in the welcoming pavilion, if someone used this matter to impeach him in the 3 pavilions, he would also be reprimanded. But now it was different. Su Lingcheng had hinted to him in front of many people. If something happened, Su Lingcheng would naturally absolve him. Who was Su Lingcheng? He was the grandson of the most powerful of the 3 pavilions, the Soaring Sky Pavilion's 3rd elder. Other than a few 2nd or 3rd generation cultivators, he was someone who could do whatever he wanted. No one dared to offend him because of a commoner using public office to avenge a personal grudge. This is too much. Xiao Hongcai was so angry that her face turned red. She was filled with righteous indignation. Indeed. If we let him do this, won't we be at a disadvantage in the future? Senior Brother Ku, you have to help us think of a way. Xiao Ran deeply felt the same way. Actually, I also want to help you, but the matter of the distribution of the spiritual jades. Senior Brother Meng never let me intervene. I don't know what to do. Senior Brother Ku said helplessly with a bitter face. He really wanted to help, but he could not. When they went to the storeroom to get the spiritual jades, Senior Brother Meng did not bring him at all. What else could he do? At this time, Linny said, "Forget it. Don't make things difficult for Senior Brother Ku. Anyway, the cave abode for cultivation is already good. Although the spiritual jades are a little small, as long as he works hard, he will still have a chance in next month's ranking competition." Hearing Lin Yi say this, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai felt a little relieved. The spiritual jades were not enough to make up for the cave abode. At the end of the day, cultivation still depended on oneself. It was useless to blame others. The cultivation world was like this. Xiao Ran had also experienced it in the secular world. The Xiao family was worse than those ancient aristocratic families, so they had fewer resources. Didn't they still have to cultivate? What was the use of being envious of others? And Xiao Hongkai was even more so in the North Island of Heaven stage. Compared with those disciples of the three pavilions who were born with the second or third generation of cultivation, there was no comparison. Since there was a cave abode to make up for it, the two hurried back to their respective cave abodes to cultivate after informing Lin Yi. Heaven rewarded the diligent. As long as they worked hard, they did not believe that they would lose to others. As for Lin Yi, he did not immediately return to the cave abode. Instead, he stopped Senior Brother Ku. "Junior Brother Lin, I know you don't feel good," the bitter senior brother said with a bitter expression. "Actually, I feel very guilty. As the steward senior brother, I can't help you with anything. I'm really bitter." Lin Yi did not expect Senior Brother Ku to say this. He could not help but laugh. "Senior Brother Ku, I am not looking for you about this. If I cared about this, I would not have given the cave abode to Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai. I am looking for you about something else." I see." Senior Brother Ku thought about it and agreed. If Lin Yi cared about this cultivation resource, why would he give it to someone else? It seemed that Lin Yi was really a generous person. He had thought too much. "Junior Brother Lin, then why are you looking for me? It's like this, Senior Brother Ku. No matter what, you are the senior brother in charge of the Welcome Pavilion. You have been here for a long time. You should have heard something about the opening of Heaven Stage Island in the secular world and the inheritors?" Lin Yi pondered for a moment and asked. He wanted to ask these questions when he came to Heaven Stage Island. However, the Heaven Stage Island was completely different from what he had imagined. There were a lot of masters there, and the competition was so fierce. Lin Yi and the others were originally favored by the heavens. They were all top masters in the secular world. However, when they came here, they really became newcomers. They were even outer disciples. This difference was really hard to adapt to. Chapter 3573. But now, not to mention meeting Zhang Liju, he didn't even know if he could survive in the North Island. "I know a little. I didn't know these things before, but before we became envoys, the Welcoming Pavilion would give us targeted training, so I know a little." The bitter Shixiang nodded. "Why do you ask, Junior Lin? If that's the case, then do you know what happens to the inheritors when we open the island?" Lin Yi asked. "Inheritors? Isn't that just a tool to open the island?" The bitter Shixiang paused. "Don't you guys use inheritors to get on the island? Generally speaking, the inheritor will be crippled after opening the heavenly island." "Crippled? What do you mean?" Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. "In order to protect the benefits of the disciples on the island, we can't let too many practitioners from the common world onto the island, and so we set up a barrier for the island," the bitter Shixiang explained. The bitter senior brother explained. "Only the top experts of the secular world can go to the island. Although the 7 inheritors are also top experts, in order to prevent too many people from going to the island, the 7 inheritors and the medium of the inheritance, which is the one who opened the island, are generally crippled. When they are under the pressure of the various types of power released by the heavenly gate, their spiritual sense and spiritual force have been drained dry. After the heavenly gate opens, they will be unconscious. Generally speaking, they are just sacrificial tools for these top experts to come to the island. However, it doesn't mean that all inheritors and mediums will faint. Last time, there were a few inheritors who came to the island. Of course, this is all hearsay. As for the specifics, you'll have to ask those at the same level as the elders to know. What? Lin Yi didn't expect the truth to be like this, even though he had some guesses. Although he had guessed it before, hearing it from the bitter Shixiang's mouth still made Lin Yi uncomfortable. Yao Yao, Shu Tangyun, Xiao Xiao, Jiu, Guan Xian, Bing Tang, they all fainted. Perhaps they didn't want him to get hurt. That was why they fainted. They were afraid that he would get hurt, so they used all their strength. They all fainted, just like Shioka. However, this made Lin Yi heave a sigh of relief. Since it was also under the pressure, and the spirit was exhausted, it was similar to Xiaoka's situation. Zhang Liju should be able to save her. Lin Yi nodded and said, "Thank you, Senior Brother Ku. I understand." "Yes. Junior Brother Lin, focus on your cultivation. After the matter of the spiritual jade, Meng Jiuguan won't target you in any other way for the time being. Work hard and get a good result in the competition in a month's time. Ruthlessly kill these people's prestige." Senior Brother Ku Bai encouraged. "Don't worry, I'll try my best," Lin Yi said. Even if it was for Shioka and Meng Yao, Lin Yi would try his best. If he wanted to go to Sky Class Island to find Zhang Liju, he'd have to get a foothold in the north first. Without a certain status and right to speak, he might not even know how to get to Middle Island. "Then I'll leave first. Find me if you need anything," Senior Brother Ku Bai said as he pointed at the mountain opposite Lin Yi's cave. "I'm on the mountain over there, cave number 9, okay." Lin Yi couldn't help but feel helpless. There were 3 masters in this pavilion. 6 steward disciples, and Senior Brother Ku Bai's cave number 9. Didn't that mean that he was ranked 9th? It seemed like it was the last cave as well. But thinking about it, even the last cave was stronger than the best one here, right? But there was nothing he could do about it. Even if Senior Brother Ku Bai was the weakest, he still had the title of the steward disciple. Meng Jiuguan couldn't restrict him in this aspect. That would be going against the rules of the pavilion. After sending Senior Brother Ku Bai away, Lin Yi started studying the spiritual jade. The quality of the spirit jade was sparkling and translucent, and it was warm and soft to the touch. Not to mention the boundless spiritual energy of the heavens and the earth contained within it. Just the quality of this jade was enough to make the rich and powerful of the world go crazy if it was placed in the secular world. Without the natural tempering of the spiritual energy of the world for thousands of years, it was impossible to produce this kind of jade, and in the common world where the spiritual energy was thin, it was impossible. Even ordinary energy stones, also known as spirit stones, were rare existences in the secular world. Of course, for a practitioner like Lin Yi, the quality of the spiritual energy was just external. The most important thing was the density of the spiritual energy. After carefully feeling and comparing them, Lin Yi realized that although these spirit jades were the same as the energy stones of the common world, the amount of spirit energy contained within them was more than 100 times that of the common world's energy stones. In other words, one spirit jade here was equivalent to 100 energy stones of the same size. No wonder so many people flocked to the spiritual jade. When some newcomers saw the spiritual jade, they couldn't help but swallow their saliva and drool. With the help of the spirit jade, the speed of training would increase by more than 100 times, but to Lin Yi, it didn't have this effect. He tried it for a bit, and he knew that the effect of the spirit jade couldn't compare to his jade space. Putting the spiritual jade aside, Lin Yi thought to himself. It seemed that he could save the spiritual jade in the future. Although he couldn't use it, for other practitioners on the island, it was a precious thing. When the time came, he could use the spiritual jade to exchange for something he needed. 2 days passed in a flash. Just as Senior Brother had guessed, during these 2 days, Meng Jiuguan didn't come looking for trouble. Lin Yi was also happy and free. He took a good time to consolidate his strength, and prepared to break through to the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm. However, even with the help of a cultivation artifact like the Jade Space, it was not easy to break through to the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm. No matter how hard Lin Yi tried, the growth of the spiritual energy in his body was very slow. It couldn't be said that there was no growth, but the extent could be said to be negligible. At this speed, if Linny wanted to break through to the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm, he would have to work hard for at least a year and a half. Although this speed was already very good for others, Linny was not satisfied. Strength was the foundation of survival. On the first day that Linny came to the Heavenly Stage Island, he had already made enemies on all sides. Not to mention people like Kong Mingming, there were already many enemies in the Foundation establishment realm. Nearby, there was Meng Jueguang, like a tiger watching its prey, and far away, there was Su Linchong, who was ready to make a move. Chapter 3574. After all, even if these people couldn't beat Lin Yi, they could still encourage others to deal with Lin Yi, just like how Kong Mingming encouraged Su Linchong and how Meng Tong encouraged Meng Jueguang. But as impatient as he was, Foundation establishment was a whole new realm. He never even heard of it before, and he didn't have any experience with it. No matter how hard he tried to find a way to break through, he didn't know where to start. I used to think that you were quite smart, but now it seems that it was all a lie. The ghost's laughter suddenly came from the side. Linny was stunned for a moment and looked at the ghost. Senior Ghost, why do you say that? You're obviously guarding a treasure mountain, but you're still wandering around like a headless fly. Don't you think you're stupid? The ghost's tone was full of disdain. Guarding a treasure mountain? Linny was moved and said, You mean there's something around me that can help me break through quickly? Nonsense! Isn't that the one beside you? You want to break through by yourself without relying on external forces? You really think you're a god? The ghost laughed. The one beside me? Linny was stunned. He subconsciously thought that the ghost was talking about the spiritual jade, so he was a little puzzled and said, Although this spiritual jade is good, it's of little value to me. It's not even 1% of the space in the jade pendant. Who said it's outside? I said it's inside the space in the jade pendant. It's in the storage space next door. The ghost reminded him helplessly. In fact, it was not a nosy person. In the past, it rarely interfered with Lin Yi. It was only after Lin Yi landed on the Heavenly Island that it began to take the initiative to communicate with Lin Yi. After all, it also had something to ask of Lin Yi. Lin Yi's strength had improved, so it was one step closer to helping it. In the secular world, it was still a matter of uncertainty. Naturally, the ghost was not in a hurry. But now that they were on the Heavenly Island, it was really right in front of them. It was impossible for them not to be anxious. Hearing this, Lin Yi quickly searched the storage space beside the jade pendant. This space was originally Lin Yi's own, so Lin Yi's speed of finding things was also quite fast. After a while, he had gone through everything in the space of the jade pendant. Finally, his eyes stopped on a pill formula. That was what he had obtained from Chang Liju's tomb in the mortal world, the method to break through the heavenly Tao left behind by the pill god Zhang Liju, the refinement of the heavenly Tao golden core. The so-called heavenly Tao golden core was also known as the foundation building pill. It was a golden core used by peak heaven rank late perfection stage experts to break through to heavenly Tao foundation building early stage. It was similar to the Qi gathering pill that a peak late phase earth class cultivator used to break through to sky class. Similarly, just like the Qi gathering pill, the Heaven's Path golden pill was also known as the foundation establishment pill. It was effective for cultivators of foundation establishment realm and below. However, after this pill was consumed, it was a little weak. It required a large amount of heaven and earth spiritual qi to consolidate the realm, just like the extreme qi gathering pill. If one couldn't absorb a large amount of heaven and earth spiritual qi, it would cause a lack of heaven and earth spiritual qi. If it was light, one would go berserk. If it was heavy, one would lose all their strength. This way, the effect was similar to the extreme qi gathering pill that Kong Mingming gave him. Of course, Lin Yi had the space of the jade pendant, so there was no weakness. But for others, the heaven and earth spiritual qi in the cave was no longer enough for the heavenly Tao golden core to absorb heaven and earth spiritual qi. They needed a large amount of spiritual jades to complement it. Only then could it be completed. Therefore, the cost of this was really frighteningly high. Even a second-generation cultivator like Su Lingchong could only consume the foundation establishment pill once or twice. Coupled with a large amount of spiritual jades, he wouldn't be able to afford it if he used it more than once. Because of these two things. Both were very precious, especially the foundation establishment pill. Not everyone could refine it. It required an alchemist, and the success rate was extremely low. The alchemists on the North Island of the Heaven stage could only successfully refine one pill after 100 attempts. Only the alchemists on the Middle Island had a higher success rate. Not to mention the grandson of the third elder of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, even the grandson of the Pavilion Master was restrained by the other two pavilions. It was impossible to use the foundation establishment pill endlessly. This had to be decided by a meeting of the three pavilions. Senior Ghost, are you talking about the elixir recipe of the Heavenly Tao Golden Core? Although Jing Jing helped me modify the divine pesticide cauldron, and with my current strength, I can also refine this foundation establishment pill, but the key is that I don't have those raw materials, Linny said with some doubts. There is no such thing in the secular world, but it doesn't mean that there is no such thing in the Heavenly Stage Island. You should pay attention here. Maybe there will be an unexpected harvest, the ghost pointed out. Oh? I see. Thank you for your guidance, Senior Ghost. Linny suddenly realized that he was really sitting on a treasure mountain without knowing it. He had not adapted to using the thinking of the Heavenly Stage Island to think about problems, and he still stayed in the secular world. Since he could collect the materials here, and he had this ready-made Heavenly Tao Golden Core pill recipe in his hands, then he could directly collect the medicinal herbs and refine it. After making up his mind, Linny immediately got up and left the cave residence. Linny was now a complete newcomer, and he was unfamiliar with the people and the place. He did not know where to find the materials here. However, even if he did not know, Senior Bitter Senior Brother definitely knew. Although Senior Bitter Senior Brother did not have much power, he definitely still knew these common sense things. Thinking of this, Linny quickly went down the mountain and came to the opposite mountain. On this mountain, there were not only 9 cave residences, there were more than 10 cave residences, but after the 9th cave residence, no one was using it. Linny came to the front of the 9th cave residence. With Lin Yi's current strength, he could forcibly break the forbidden spell of this cave residence and break in, but Lin Yi did not do so. He could not show his strength now. Lin Yi patted the 9th cave residence with the strength of the peak late stage heaven stage great perfection, and then slowly waited. Sure enough, after a while, Senior Bitter Senior Brother came out of the cave residence with a puzzled look. Under normal circumstances, no one would look for Senior Bitter Senior Brother, no one would look for him for anything big or small. Except for some routine activities, Senior Bitter Senior Brother would stay in the cave residence and cultivate. Seeing that it was Lin Yi, Senior Bitter Senior Brother came to a realization. It turns out to be Junior Brother Lin, what's the matter? It turned out that no one usually looked for this Senior Bitter Senior Brother. His reputation was really well deserved. Chapter 3575. That's right. Senior Brother Ku nodded and said, in addition to the fixed monthly distribution of cultivation resources, the rest can be obtained by completing tasks. Low-level tasks and high-level tasks are all issued with cultivation resources. The rest is to participate in the trial, but it's not something you can participate in whenever you want. It depends on the unified arrangement of the Welcome Pavilion. Then, there's the exchange between disciples, and the purchase of cultivation resources in shops. For these two channels, you can go to the North Island Market, where some disciples set up stalls to sell and exchange cultivation resources, and there are also some fixed shops selling these things. I see. Thank you, Senior Brother Ku. Lin Yi nodded after listening. It seemed that this was similar to the cultivation world in the secular world, with exchanges, trials, and markets. Following the direction pointed out by Senior Brother Ku, Lin Yi walked in the direction of the market. From the welcome pavilion to the east, after climbing over 2 mountains, Linny soon found the market, which was bustling with people. It was not impossible to trade for the herbs he needed, or even to directly encounter the ready-made heavenly law golden elixir. However, Linny did not directly enter the market, but turned to a deserted corner and put on the 1,000 silk mask. In this way, he completely changed into a strange face, so that even if there was an accident, he would not be suspected, and his strength would be exposed. Although the market was initially organized by some disciples and rogue cultivators, it had now grown to a large scale over the years. Not only did it have formed shops, but it was also divided into 3 trading streets according to strength. The market was built on the mountain, and the 3 streets existed side by side from the inside to the outside, called the outer street, the middle street, and the inner street. Because of its reputation, not only the inner disciples of the 3 pavilions and the newcomers of the welcome pavilion came to set up stalls, but many rogue cultivator masters from the nearby cultivation villages would also come. There were all kinds of martial arts skills, elixirs, and treasures of heaven and earth, and because everyone's strength was similar, many things happened to be directly used by the newcomers, so this market was famous far and wide, and it was a must-visit place for all newcomers. Linny walked around. He discovered that most of the stalls on the outer street were experts below the heaven-stage great circle realm. It was the most crowded and lively place. On the other hand, those entering and leaving the middle street were mostly experts in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm and above. The flow of people was slightly smaller than the outer street, but it was still endless. But as for what the innermost inner street looked like, however, Linny did not have the opportunity to meet them because the guard in charge of maintaining order at the street entrance said that his strength was too low and did not allow him to enter. Linny only knew that those who could enter and leave this place were all experts whose strength he could not see through. It seemed like this heavenly island was indeed filled with experts. Linny sighed in his heart. Not bothering about what the inner street looked like, he simply wandered around while looking for the herbs he needed. However, after wandering through the outer street and middle street, Linny only found the 5 herbs listed on the pill recipe. As for the 6th and most crucial herb, the heart-devouring exquisite grass, there was no trace of it. Could it be that there was no heart-devouring exquisite grass on this heaven-stage island? Or in other words, could it be that it was only sold in the most mysterious inner street? Linny's heart suddenly tightened. Unwilling to give up, he continued to wander around, but it was still to no avail. Not only that, he did not encounter a ready-made heavenly Tao golden pill. It seemed like this thing was indeed precious, and no one took it out to sell or exchange. It seemed like he had to find Senior Brother Kubai to inquire about this heart-devouring exquisite grass. Helpless, Linny could only turn around and leave the market. Before he found the heart-devouring exquisite grass, even if he gathered the other 5 herbs, it would be useless. What's more, Linny walked around here for a few rounds and discovered the currency here was not money, but spiritual jades. Now he only had a piece of spiritual jade the size of an egg on hand, and he could not afford these 5 herbs at all. After leaving the market, Linny kept the 1,000 silk mask and went straight to Senior Brother Kubai's cultivation cave abode. Once again, he arrived at the entrance of cave abode number 9. Linny slightly activated the cave abode's forbidden spell, and after waiting outside for a while, he saw Senior Brother Kubai walk out from inside again. Seeing Linny, Senior Brother Kubai couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Junior Brother Lin, why are you here again? Is there anything else?" Linny nodded and asked, "It's like this, Senior Brother Kubai, I still want to ask you about something. Do you know where I can find the heart-devouring exquisite grass?" "Heart-devouring exquisite grass?" Senior Brother Kubai frowned and thought for a while, then said uncertainly, "I've heard people mention it before. It's said that this herb is very rare, and we don't have it anywhere else. There's only one place that has it." "Where?" Linny asked. His worried heart was finally at ease. As long as there was this herb, everything would be easy. "Back Mountain. However, that place is a restricted area of the sect." You are not allowed to enter during normal times. Only on the 25th of every month will the disciples of the welcoming pavilion be allowed to enter for training. The purpose of this training is to increase your actual combat ability, and then seek the opportunity to break through. Senior Brother Kubai explained and then asked with some doubt. But then again, the heart-devouring exquisite grass seems to be a type of poisonous herb. Junior Brother Lin, why are you asking about this? To be honest, Senior Brother Ku, I plan to refine some pills for myself to aid my cultivation. Linny answered, but he did not mention the Heavenly Path Golden Pill. Firstly, although he and Senior Brother Kubai were on the same side, they weren't that close yet. Secondly, it would be useless even if he told them. Senior Brother Kubai wouldn't be able to help. If it was leaked by someone with ulterior motives, it might cause unexpected trouble. As for his identity as an alchemist, even if Lin Yi didn't tell him, Kang Ming would tell him when the time came, so there was no need to hide it. So, Junior Brother Lin, you are actually an alchemist? Senior Brother Kubai suddenly said in surprise, and his heart was even more shocked. One had to know that although alchemists had a respectable status, their own strength was much weaker than other experts of the same level. Moreover, Lin Yi had clearly defeated Meng Tong, a heaven-stage great perfection expert, with a single move. This Junior Brother Lin was really hiding his strength, repeatedly surprising everyone. Lin Yi smiled in response and didn't say anything. But this is also good. Since you can refine your own pills, even if they aren't that good, they can still make up for the lack of cultivation resources. But I have to remind you, Junior Lin, that those pills from the common world have very limited effects on us, so you should focus more on your training. Making pills doesn't have much of an effect on you. Lin Yi nodded. But I have to remind you, Junior Lin, that the pills from the common world have very limited effects on us. Chapter 3576. Seeing Lin Yi's expression, he knew that Lin Yi still wanted to try, so he didn't try to dissuade him anymore. Anyway, Lin Yi had his own ideas. If he wanted to refine it, then so be it. If the effect of the pill wasn't great, then he would give up. Okay, then I'll thank Senior Brother Ku in advance. But as for the pill refining, let me get the heart-devouring exquisite grass first. This is the most important material. Lin Yi nodded. Since the heart-devouring exquisite grass could only be found at the back of the mountain, and the newcomers were only allowed to enter the mountain on the 25th, then he could only wait for a while. During this time, he could think of a way to get more spiritual jades. Otherwise, even if he got the heart-devouring exquisite grass, he wouldn't have enough spiritual jades to buy the other 5 herbs, and he still wouldn't be able to refine the heavenly golden pill. Thinking of this, Lin Yi asked Senior Brother Kubai. Senior Brother Ku, if I want to get more spiritual jades, what can I do? Well, other than the welcome pavilion giving you a piece of spiritual jades every month, there are only 2 ways to get more spiritual jades. Senior Brother Kubai counted with his fingers and said, One is if you have any natural treasures, you can sell them in the market. That way, you can exchange them for spiritual jades. You should know this. As for the other way, you can do the daily tasks issued by the welcome pavilion for the newcomers. This way, you can also get spiritual jades as a reward. I see. Senior Brother Kubai, can you tell me more about the tasks? Lin Yi asked thoughtfully. As for the first method that Senior Brother Kubai mentioned, it was useless for him now. Firstly, he didn't have any extra natural treasures. Secondly, even if he had them, they were brought up from the secular world. Obviously, they couldn't be sold at a good price on the Heaven Stage Island, so it was better to keep them. Senior Brother Kubai nodded and said, You newcomers aren't strong after all. Also, the purpose of coming here is to cultivate. Breaking through to the foundation establishment stage as soon as possible is the most important thing, so the welcome pavilion won't issue really challenging tasks for you. Except for some temporary small tasks, the most common daily task is to enter the spiritual jade mine under our feet to mine. As for the low-level tasks such as cleaning the kitchen that I mentioned to you before, I'm not going to give it to you. For example, if you clean for a year, you might be given 1 or 2 pieces of spiritual jade as a reward at the end of the year. This depends on the new deacon's opinion and whether he will help you apply for it or not, from the looks of it. As for the last one, Lin Yi didn't need to consider it. No matter who became the new deacon, he wouldn't be rewarded, especially Kong Mingming. Spirit jades were priceless items. If one spent some effort to do some low-level tasks such as cleaning the kitchen, they would be able to obtain spirit jades. That welcoming pavilion would have gone bankrupt long ago. However, when he heard that the daily task given to the new disciples was to go down and mine, Lin Yi did not expect it. After all, there was a spirit jade mine beneath their feet, and it was normal for them to rely on the mountain to make a living. If it was just a mine, they could just find some able-bodied men to do it. Why bother so many heaven-ranked experts? Senior brother Kubai saw Lin Yi's confusion and immediately said with a smile, "The spirit jade mine is different from other mines. Ordinary people can't go down to mine it. Why is that? Could there be some special reason?" Lin Yi asked curiously. "Junior brother Lin, you also know that the spirit jade contains an extremely dense amount of heaven and earth spiritual qi. Even if the spirit jade mine is not specially guided and gathered, the heaven and earth spiritual qi that naturally escapes from it is already far greater than that of the outside world. As for heaven rank and above cultivators like us, the more the better. But for ordinary people without any strength, it's not a good thing. Perhaps half a day later, he would not be able to withstand it and explode to death. Not to mention ordinary people, even cultivators below the heaven stage can't do it." The bitter senior brother shook his head and said, "It's like an ordinary person. He can't live without oxygen, but if he runs into an environment with a high concentration of oxygen, he will die. Instead, you'll get oxygen poisoning and die." Lin Yi nodded after listening. He quickly understood the reason. This was a typical case of the weak not being able to receive nourishment. The heaven and earth spiritual qi was equivalent to a great tonic. But if the tonic was too much, it would become poison. Cultivators like heaven stage experts had already tempered their bodies thousands of times. Compared to ordinary people, their bodies were more than 10 times stronger. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth was naturally a tonic to them, but to the weak, ordinary people, it was a poison that would take their lives. Ordinary people and low-level cultivators couldn't mine it. After all, the spirit jade mine was a very key strategic resource. It was impossible to find outside cultivators to come in. After thinking about it, the most suitable people to do this job were the newcomers in the welcome pavilion. After all, they were already outer disciples. They could be trusted to use their own people. Of course, this mission could also be done by the inner disciples of the 3 pavilions. But when their strength reached the level of the inner disciples, they could do some challenge missions with higher rewards. There was no need to run to the bottom of the mine to do hard work with these newcomers. It would be shameful if others knew about it. For a newcomer like Lin Yi, of course, there was no need to worry about losing face. Moreover, he was now at a bottleneck in cultivation. No matter how much he meditated, it would be difficult to improve in a short period of time. If he wanted to break through as soon as possible, he could only rely on the Heaven Path gold core. Not to mention the heart-devouring exquisite grass, he would only have the chance to enter the back mountain trial on the 25th. If he could earn enough spirit jades before that, he could quickly gather the materials to start refining pills. So in Lin Yi's view, this mining mission was a good choice. "Bitter senior brother, how is the reward for this mining mission?" Lin Yi asked. The reward was the key. Although mining was hard work, they were all heaven-ranked experts after all. The reward couldn't be too shabby. Otherwise, no one would be willing to take this mission. 100 miles saving 1. That is to say, for every 100 spirit jades you collect, you can get 1 spirit jade as reward. If you don't have 100 spirit jades for the time being, then you can only collect the reward after you collect 100 spirit jades. Bitter senior brother patiently answered every question. Then, he added, on average, a newcomer can collect about 3 to 10 spirit jades a day. It's normal to not be able to mine. But with experience and luck, it's possible to collect 20 to 30 spirit jades a day. Chapter 3577. That does sound good. The bitter senior brother laughed bitterly and shook his head, saying, But junior brother Lin, don't blame senior brother for discouraging you all. The ones in charge of assigning this task are the stewards of the 3 pavilions, and it's not like you don't know about our Clear Cloud Pavilion's situation. The decision is all in eldest senior brother's hands. I have no say in this matter. That is a problem. Linny was also helpless. Although he wanted to do this mining task, if Meng Jiaguang didn't agree, everything was just fleeting clouds. Linny thought for a moment and said, Although the decision is in his hands, this is, after all, a recognized daily task of the Welcome Pavilion. In principle, it should be encouraged for newcomers to do it. If I bring it up in front of everyone, even if he is the eldest senior brother, he can't just refuse for no reason, right? Although Meng Jiaguang was the eldest senior brother, the Welcome Pavilion was not opened by his family. Even if he had some power in his hands, it was not something he could do as he pleased. At least on the surface, he had to maintain fairness and justice. Otherwise, if the news spread, there would be people coming to settle accounts with him. That is the reason, but even if he is forced to agree to let you mine, he will still have ways to make things difficult for you. Senior brother Bitter had a deep feeling about this and said, There are good and bad minerals in the spirit jade mine. In a good mine, you can easily mine spirit jades. If you are lucky, you may be able to mine 100 pieces in 3 to 5 days. In a bad mine, the chances of finding spirit jades are very small. If you are unlucky, even if you work hard for a whole day, you will not be able to mine even 1 piece of spirit jade. This is a common thing. The mining area allocated to our Clear Cloud Pavilion is not that good to begin with. If senior brother Meng sends you to the worst mining area, then to collect all 100 pieces of spirit jades, I don't know how much effort you would have to put in. Perhaps even after 1 or 2 months of hard work, you still wouldn't get paid. Instead, it will delay your own cultivation progress. The gains do not make up for the losses. Senior brother Bitter earnestly advised, afraid that Linny would be stuck in a dead end. Senior brother Ku, don't worry. I'll think about it carefully. Linny nodded. Linny needed those herbs, and mining was the only way to get them. Of course, he knew the possibility that senior marshal brother Ku Bai was talking about. In fact, according to Meng Jiaguang's style of doing things, once he mentioned that he wanted to go down to the mines, it was certain that he would be assigned to the worst mining area. If it was someone else, the final result would definitely not be worth it. However, Linny was different. Don't forget that he had the jade pendant space. The nature of spirit jades was the same as the energy stones in the secular world. Since the space of the jade pendant could charge energy stones, it was very likely that it could also charge energy for spirit jades. Linny had been busy consolidating his realm for the past 2 days, so he hadn't tried this. But now he could. Of course. He had to spend some time to consume enough spiritual energy in this piece of spirit jade. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to see the effect when the experiment was done. Once the experiment was really successful, it would be rich for Linny. At that time, he could secretly steal some waste jades without spiritual energy from the spirit jade mine. After being charged by the space of the jade pendant, he could completely turn them into real spirit jades to trade with others. In this way, even if Meng Jiaguang assigned him to the worst mining area, it wouldn't matter. Spirit jades were not easy to find, but waste jades should not be so difficult to find. At that time, in the hands of Linny, waste jades were spirit jades. Linny couldn't wait to go back to do the experiment. Just as he was about to say goodbye to senior brother Bitter, he looked up and saw Meng Jiaguang and Meng Tong walking down from the 8th cave abode not far above. From their mouths, Linny even vaguely heard his name. These 2 guys with bad intentions, why did they mention his name for no reason? While Linny was secretly frowning, Meng Jiaguang and Meng Tong also saw him. As if they had bumped into something, their expressions suddenly froze. After the 2 looked at each other, a strange evil smile appeared on their faces. Isn't this our Blue Cloud Pavilion's strongest newcomer? Could it be that you ran out of spirit jades? Running to find junior brother Bitter for warmth? Meng Jiaguang said with a face of ridicule. Unfortunately, junior brother Bitter is a clay bodhisattva. He can't carry a god like you. Although Meng Jiaguang was so sarcastic, senior brother Bitter still greeted him honestly. Greetings, senior brother Meng. And Lin Yi also greeted him without batting an eyelid. He, the strongest newcomer? More like the most pretentious newcomer. In next month's ranking competition, just wait to make a fool of yourself. Meng Tong sneered. He was still brooding over the fact that Lin Yi defeated him in one move. Especially after that, some unknown guy actually gave Lin Yi the title of Blue Cloud Pavilion's strongest newcomer. This made him very unhappy. I haven't heard of the strongest newcomer. But in next month's ranking competition, I hope you won't be careless and underestimate your opponent again. Otherwise, if I accidentally defeat you in one move and end up being said to be pretentious again, I will be wronged. Lin Yi replied with a smile. Humph. Just wait and see. There will be a time for you to cry. Being exposed by Lin Yi, Meng Tong's face suddenly stiffened. Including Meng Jiaguang, everyone in Blue Cloud Pavilion thought that Meng Tong lost to Lin Yi because of carelessness. But he himself knew that in the previous fight, in order to show off, he went all out and did not have any carelessness. In other words, when Lin Yi defeated him in one move, it was a reflection of their true strength. To be honest, Meng Tong was a little afraid of Lin Yi now. But fortunately, he had a backer like Meng Jiaguang behind him. He could be taken care of openly and secretly. And Lin Yi also offended a big shot like Su Lingchong in public, so he would be suppressed in all aspects. Under such circumstances, as long as he trained well in the next month, it would be enough for him to close the gap. What's more, he, Meng Tong, was a local heaven stage great perfection expert. How could he be afraid of a country bumpkin like Lin Yi? Next month's ranking competition was a good opportunity to wash away his shame. At that time, he would let all the newcomers see clearly who was the strongest newcomer in Blue Cloud Pavilion. However, when he thought of the plan he had just discussed with Meng Jiaguang, Meng Tong immediately became proud. As long as the plan was successful, there was no need to wait until next month's ranking competition. He would be able to see Lin Yi, the pretentious bastard, in great misfortune. Thinking of this, Meng Tong repeatedly signaled to Meng Jiaguang with his eyes. He could not wait to see Lin Yi's misfortune. Chapter 3578. The newcomers should be familiar with the Welcome Pavilion, but they don't know much about the outside, so I'm going to call them out and go to the Eastern Market to familiarize themselves with the environment. After all, this is our duty as the steward. Meng Jiaguang said faintly. Senior brother Meng is right. The bitter senior brother nodded in agreement. The steward took the newcomers to familiarize themselves with the surrounding environment. This was an annual practice. It was not surprising that Meng Jiaguang mentioned this at this time. And, since junior brother Lin is already here, bitter senior brother, you take him to the market and wait for us. I will call the other newcomers. Meng Jiaguang instructed. Senior brother Meng, why don't I call the newcomers? The bitter senior brother asked carefully. Generally speaking, this kind of hard work of running errands was his job. Otherwise, why would he be called bitter senior brother? He was already used to it. However, this time, Meng Jiaguang was going to personally run the errands to call the newcomers. Did the sun rise from the west? Unexpectedly, Meng Jiaguang waved his hand and glanced at Lin Yi next to him and said, No, you should take our strongest newcomer there first, so that you don't waste his precious time. Hee. As he said this, without waiting for the bitter senior brother to speak again, Meng Jiaguang took Meng Tong and left. The bitter senior brother looked at the back of the two people and couldn't help but mutter. Senior brother Meng's style today feels a little different from before. Lin Yi also shook his head. Although Meng Jiaguang mocked him just now, he actually didn't take this opportunity to make him follow the bitter senior brother to run errands. This was indeed a bit strange. According to normal logic, Even if he couldn't make himself suffer any substantial loss, he could always use this opportunity to disgust himself. With Meng Jiuguang's temper, how could he easily let it go? Lin Yi and senior brother Bitter looked at each other. They couldn't think of a reason at the moment, so they could only follow Meng Jiuguang's instructions and go to the market square to wait for them. Although Lin Yi had just been to the market, in order to not give himself away, he had to pretend that it was his first time here. After all, with his original appearance, this was indeed the first time he had come to this market. The two of them waited at the entrance of the market for a while. Then, they saw Meng Jiuguang leading a group of newcomers from afar. As for Meng Tong, he seemed to have fallen behind because of something and had to jog all the way to catch up. He gave Meng Jiuguang a look, and Meng Jiuguang nodded in understanding. Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai were also in the crowd. After seeing senior brother Bitter and Lin Yi, they were relieved as if they had found an organization. They came up to greet the two of them and looked around curiously. Seeing the bustling market, Li Tianlan's heart sank. The group of newcomers' faces were all filled with excitement. Although the markets in the secular world were 100 times livelier than this, it must be known that this was a market for cultivators. Everyone who came in and out was at least a heaven stage expert. The goods here, whether it was martial arts, medicinal pills, or all kinds of heavenly treasures, were all things that could not be bought in other places. There was no comparison between the two at all. Although these newcomers only had a piece of spiritual jade in their hands, it was basically impossible to buy anything in this market. However, the purpose of bringing them out was not to shop, but to familiarize themselves with the environment. Therefore, Meng Jiuguang still patiently introduced a lot of the rules of the market to them. Of course, Meng Jiuguang wasn't so kind. He just let these disciples think that he was knowledgeable and admired him. Otherwise, this coolie would have long become bitter. However, this was a great benefit to Lin Yi. After all, he had concealed his identity when he came. Although he had strolled around a few times, he didn't know much about the specific rules of the market. Now that he had heard Meng Jiuguang's introduction, he had a rough idea of how to do business here. In this market, although there were many cases of bartering, it was rare. After all, it was rare for both parties to trade to be interested in each other's things. Moreover, the value of both parties had to be similar. This situation was still very rare. Most of the time, transactions between each other relied on the common currency, spiritual jades. This was also very easy to understand. First, spiritual jades were very common on this heavenly island. Second, spiritual jades were precious and were of great use to all cultivators. Except for special cases like Lin Yi who had a jade pendant space, basically, even the higher-level experts still relied on spiritual jades for cultivation. Therefore, there was no risk of devaluation. Over time, it became the common currency for transactions between each other. This was also a matter of course. However, even if everyone admitted that spiritual jades were the common currency, there were still some things to pay attention to. The most important thing was the quality and volume of the spiritual jades. The so-called quality of spiritual jades was to look at the concentration of spiritual energy in the spiritual jades. According to the rules of the market, the spiritual jades used for transactions must be unused spiritual jades. Once someone was found to use their own spiritual jades to trade as new spiritual jades, the management of the market would impose a heavy punishment. The purpose was to prevent people from taking advantage of this loophole to fish in troubled waters and ruin the reputation of the market. After all, for cultivators, the value of the spiritual jades and the spiritual jades that had been used were completely different. If they accidentally bought some spiritual jades that had used up most of their spiritual energy, wouldn't it be a huge loss for the seller? In addition, the waste jades in the spiritual jade mine with insufficient natural spiritual energy couldn't be taken out for use. If they were in the secular world, they would simply be natural counterfeit banknotes. As for the volume of spiritual jades, it was even easier to understand. Even if the concentration of spiritual energy in the world was the same, if the volume was different, the value of the spiritual jades would naturally be higher or lower. Generally speaking, the price of spiritual jades in this market was based on the most common average size of spiritual jades. As for the egg-sized spiritual jade in Lin Yi's hand, the actual value could only be a little more than half a piece. People would only reluctantly accept it if 3 pieces were counted as 2 pieces. As for the large spiritual jades like Meng Tong's, even if 1 piece was counted as 2 pieces, people would still be very willing. Of course, there was also a rule to pay attention to. That was, don't be dishonest and be the third hand. Once you were discovered by the patrolling management, it was a small matter to abolish your cultivation on the spot. Even if you were beaten to death, there would be no place to reason. Chapter 3579. Moreover, no merchant was a fool. Without some ability, they wouldn't dare to sell things here casually. Every item in their stall would be locked onto by their consciousness at all times. If it was really stolen, the person whose consciousness disappeared on the person would be the one who stole it. Even if they directly took the person's life, no one would speak up for them. After Meng Jiaguang finished explaining the rules, he deliberately looked at Lin Yi and said coldly, "Those poor people from the secular world, you have to be more careful. Don't think that this is a country bumpkin's place. Keep your hands and feet clean. Otherwise, if you really take someone's things and get beaten to death, you can only blame yourself." Of course, there was a deeper meaning behind Meng Jiaguang's words, because, although Lin Yi didn't show it on the surface, his heart was shocked. Lin Yi had the space in the jade pendant. He could use his consciousness and perception to store the things he fancied into the space in the jade pendant without anyone noticing. It was just like when he obtained a large sum of money from the Red Conch and the Overseas Cultivators Association in the secular world. Previously, Lin Yi really wanted to do so, but he wasn't an impulsive person. He planned to observe first. But at this moment, after listening to Meng Jiaguang's words, he secretly felt lucky. In the future, unless he was out of his mind, he wouldn't dare to try such a method of reaping without sowing. If he really stole things and was locked onto by others, not only would his wearing the 1,000 silk mask be easily exposed, even the matter of the space in the jade pendant might be discovered. No one in the secular world discovered it, but it didn't mean that no one on the heavenly island, which was full of experts, could discover it. If he was discovered, then Lin Yi really wanted to cry but had no tears. He definitely wouldn't do such a thing to lose the big picture because of a small gain. The group of newcomers followed Meng Jiaguang as they walked around the market. From time to time, they would see things that caught their fancy. Although they only had 1 piece of spiritual jade on hand, this didn't hinder their enthusiasm for asking for the price. Even if they didn't have it now, they could still buy it in the future when they had more money. In the future, there would always be a direction to work towards. With the other rookies doing so, Lin Yi could naturally do the same since he was in the crowd. He took the opportunity to ask about the prices of the 5 herbs he needed, but to prevent others from noticing anything amiss, he also asked about the prices of many other items. He appeared rather proactive. Meng Jiaguang and Meng Tong witnessed this scene. He could not help but sneer. From their point of view, with Lin Yi's current situation, not to mention obtaining more spiritual jades, he could only get the smallest and worst quality spiritual jades every month. What's the use of actively asking for a price? Even if he saved for a year, he might not be able to afford a single item. He's just like a clown. However, Lin Yi clearly didn't care about their expressions. He carefully calculated for a moment. If he wanted to buy the 5 kinds of herbs that he needed, he would need at least 8 pieces of spirit jades. But the amount of spirit jades he had on hand could only be counted as more than half a piece. He was short of 7.5 pieces. He still had a long way to go. The group strolled around the outer street and the middle street. As for the most mysterious inner street, it was obviously impossible for them to enter with their strength. In fact, even the strongest among them, Meng Jiaguang, the steward's senior apprentice brother, did not have the qualifications to enter the inner street. He could only resentfully look at it from afar before retreating. Because entering the inner street did not depend on strength, but identity. One must be an outstanding inner disciple of one of the 3 pavilions, and could only enter with their identity token. Although Meng Jiuguang had the qualifications to be an inner disciple, he was an inner disciple of the most miserable Blue Cloud Pavilion of the 3 pavilions. Among the entire Blue Cloud Pavilion's inner disciples, there were not many who had the qualifications to enter the inner street. This had to be in the competition of the 3 pavilions. Only the disciples who ranked at the top were qualified to enter. After strolling around the city, Meng Jiuguang directly led everyone back to the Welcome Pavilion, but did not let them leave immediately. This trip to the city seemed to have ignited the ambitions of the newcomers. Compared to the restraint and nervousness when they first arrived, the newcomers were clearly much more lively and calm. It seemed that they had gradually regained their confidence as heaven stage experts. Even in the face of such a strong steward senior apprentice brother like Meng Jiuguang, they dared to open their mouths and ask their own questions, unlike at the beginning when they did not dare to say anything. After all, experts who could cultivate to the late stage of heaven stage and above were not truly weak. There were only a few who were as timid as the bitter senior apprentice brother. Although the majority of the newcomers were assigned to the Blue Cloud Pavilion, they still had their own ambitions. And this trip to the city had broadened their horizons. It had also finally clarified the most basic condition to achieve their ambitions, and that was spirit jades. In this heaven stage island, without spirit jades, everything was empty talk. They couldn't buy martial techniques, medicinal pills, or heavenly treasures. If they didn't have the assistance of these external items and relied solely on their own cultivation, most of the people here wouldn't be able to reach the foundation building stage even if they cultivated to the point of death, let alone higher realms later on. A penny stumped a hero, and a piece of spirit jades could similarly stump these heaven stage experts. Without spirit jades, it would be difficult to take a single step forward in the future. Senior apprentice Brother Meng, how can we obtain more spirit jades? Someone asked the question that was on everyone's mind. One by one, fiery gazes immediately focused on Meng Jiuguang. That's a good question. Meng Jiuguang smiled, a trace of pride flashing in his eyes. As the steward senior apprentice brother, his main authority was to distribute spirit jades, and this was also the reason why everyone respected him, fawned on him, and even feared him. He was not afraid of people having ambitions, but rather, he was afraid that people had no ambitions. If they had ambitions, they would want spirit jades, and they would listen to him obediently. But if they had no ambitions, then they would be strong without desires, and he would not be able to discipline them. Therefore, bringing these newcomers to the city, other than familiarizing them with the environment, had another more important effect for Meng Jiuguang, and that was to arouse their desires. As long as they had desires and ambitions, there was no need to worry that these people would not listen to him in the future. Seeing the fervent expressions of the newcomers, Meng Jiuguang said with a tone of voice, "You have to give something in order to get something in return. Other than the Welcome Pavilion giving you a piece of spirit jades every month, if you want to obtain more spirit jades, there is only one way, and that is to accept a task from me. After completing the task, you will be rewarded." "May I ask, Senior Apprentice Brother Meng, what is the task?" someone asked anxiously. "It's very simple. Go to the Spirit Jade Mine to mine. As long as you mine 100 pieces, you will receive a piece of Spirit Jade as a reward. Whoever wants to go, you can come and register with me now," Meng Jiuguang announced loudly. Chapter 3580. Senior Apprentice Brother Meng, I want to sign up. Senior Apprentice Brother Meng, count me in. Senior Apprentice Brother Meng, me too, me too. A group of people immediately surrounded Meng Jiuguang, each and every one of them trying to please him. Although Meng Jiuguang was proud of himself, he still pretended to be displeased and said, "What's with all the noise? What's with all this commotion? Come one by one, those who want to sign up, raise your hands high." Meng Jiuguang was in control, so everyone hurriedly quietened down, for fear that if they made him unhappy, they would lose their jobs. At this time, if someone did not perform well, they would immediately be glared at by everyone else, causing public anger. This was the effect he wanted. Meng Jiuguang smiled proudly. If it was in the past, he would have been able to make these newcomers obedient on the first day of registration. In the end, he did not expect that a freak like Lin Yi would appear this year, stealing the limelight on the first day. Not only did he make Meng Tong a laughingstock, but he also made him, the steward, lose face, let alone establish any prestige in front of these newcomers. However, the arm could not twist the thigh. In the end, he, Meng Jiaguang, was the steward who held the power. Although it took some effort, these newcomers still had to listen to him, Meng Jiaguang. If they did not listen to Meng Jiaguang, could it be that they would listen to Lin Yi, this secular world country bumpkin? The newcomers who wanted to sign up for mining all raised their hands high. When Meng Jiaguang casually called out a name, that newcomer immediately acted as if he had won the lottery. He thanked and flattered Meng Jiaguang profusely. There were even people who swore on the spot that they would be obedient to him from now on, making Meng Jiaguang feel very good. After a round of calling, out of the 15 newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion, 12 were already standing behind Meng Jiaguang. Needless to say, the remaining 3 were naturally Lin Yi's group. Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai clenched their fists unwillingly when they saw everyone's mocking gazes. To be honest, they were the same as the other rookies. In fact, they were the same as the other newcomers and wanted to seize this opportunity to earn spiritual jades. This wasn't purely because of their standpoint. It was mainly because they had taken advantage of the time when Meng Jiaguang had called out names to force their senior brother to analyze the situation for them. They had already said this to Lin Yi before, and it could be summed up in 10 words: mining has risks. This was what they had said to Lin Yi before. Xiao Ran already had the first cave abode at the foot of the mountain. Compared to the others, he was not as reliant on spirit jades. He only needed to cultivate diligently. Although Qiao Hongsai's cave was not that great, his current strength was only at the peak of the late stage of Heaven's Stage. His short-term goal was to reach the peak of Heaven's Stage Great Circle. At this stage, his need for spirit jades was not too high, and he could completely rely on the existing cultivation resources. After listening to senior brother Kubai's advice, the two of them pondered for a while and finally chose to give up on this opportunity. It was not wise to be greedy, and the most important thing was to take care of the present. However, to everyone's surprise, the 2 henchmen of Lin Yi, Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai, did not raise their hands. Instead, it was Lin Yi himself who raised his hand. "Senior brother Meng, I want to sign up." What was going on? The rookies were immediately in an uproar. Even the 2 lackeys were able to resist the temptation. On the contrary, Lin Yi, the boss, couldn't block it. This was 2F** King cowardly. How shameless was this guy? Oh? Meng Jiaguang was also stunned for a moment. After he reacted, he sneered and said, "Looks like the temptation of spirit jades is really not to be underestimated. Even our strongest rookies are moved. As the big senior brother in charge, I can't be biased. Since you have made up your mind to sign up, then I'll count you in." "Thank you, senior brother Meng." Lin Yi smiled faintly. Well said, well said." Meng Jiaguang chuckled meaningfully. He couldn't reject Lin Yi's open and above-board sign-up. Of course, he wouldn't reject it. Meng Tong saw this and immediately became anxious. He moved closer to Meng Jiaguang's ear and whispered, "Ninth cousin, how can we let Lin Yi, that bastard, take advantage of this? If he's lucky enough to earn spirit jades, then my ranking competition next month will be in danger. Idiot! I'm helping you, don't you understand?" Meng Jiaguang turned his head and scolded in a low voice. "If he didn't sign up, I wouldn't be able to do anything to him. But now that he has signed up, I just need to throw him into the dead mining area. I guarantee that he won't be able to collect 100 pieces of spirit jades in his lifetime. In this way, he won't have time to cultivate. Won't your chances of winning be greatly increased? You idiot, you really can't carve a rotten wood." Of course, there was one thing he didn't say. That was, even a thorn like Lin Yi had admitted defeat in front of him, the big senior brother. Wouldn't the others be even more obedient? With this incident, Meng Jiaguang also regained his lost face. "I see. Ninth cousin is really brilliant." Meng Tong came to a sudden realization. He didn't think of this at all. He was afraid that Lin Yi would earn spirit jades. Now that he heard Meng Jiaguang say this, he understood that Lin Yi was simply seeking his own death. Nonsense! If it were you with a pig's brain, you wouldn't even be able to grasp a good opportunity that was delivered to your doorstep. Meng Jiaguang curled his lips and asked worriedly in a low voice. Have you done what I asked you to do? Did anything go wrong? Ninth cousin, don't worry. I've done everything according to what you said. There's absolutely no mistake. Meng Tong immediately understood and promised. That's good. If this plan succeeds, you won't have to think about how to deal with Lin Yi in next month's qualifier because he won't be able to live until then. A mere newbie from the secular world dares to challenge me? This time, I'll let him know how many eyes Lord Ma has. Chapter 3581. Hiss. All the newcomers gasped in shock. Some of them actually had this idea, but after hearing Meng Jiaguang's words, they broke out in cold sweat. Crippling the meridians of the hands and feet meant that they would be a useless person from then on. There was no way they could cultivate anymore. To these heaven stage experts, this was even more terrifying than letting them die. No matter if it was an internal cultivator or a physical cultivator, they would basically be worse than dogs on this heaven stage island. Let me say one more thing. This rule is not only effective in the spirit jade mine, it is also effective outside. In the past, there were newcomers who stole other people's spirit jades, and the outcome was the same. Meng Jiaguang sneered, but his gaze was fixed on Lin Yi. After a while, he waved his hand and said, All right, all of you can disperse. Those who signed up to enter the mine will gather tomorrow morning. Lin Yi looked at Meng Jiaguang curiously. That smile just now had a deeper meaning to it, and his instincts told him that there was something fishy going on, but he couldn't tell what it was. He could only stay vigilant and take it one step at a time. Junior brother Lin, your registration is not appropriate. The bitter senior brother sighed and said, It's fine if you can't mind the spirit jades, but when the time comes, you will be wasting your cultivation time, and your realm will become more and more difficult to increase. Not only him, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai were also puzzled. Mining under Meng Jiaguang was not worth it. Even they could see this clearly, so they did not believe that Lin Yi, who was more assertive, could not see it. You guys don't have to worry, I know what I am doing. I just want to take a look at the spirit jade mine. Think about it, there must be abundant heaven and earth energy there. If I don't mine it, it will be worth it to cultivate there. Lin Yi did not explain much and only said so. That's right. The bitter senior brother suddenly slapped his thigh and said, Why didn't I think of that? The spiritual chi of heaven and earth was very abundant in the spiritual jade mine. It couldn't be compared to those better cave abodes, but it was still better than junior brother Lin's cave abode number 14. However, junior brother Lin, you have to think this through. If you can't extract a single piece of spiritual jade for a long time, you'll have to pay for it. That's why you can only use this move once. Moreover, you can't just sit and cultivate inside. You can only cultivate while mining. That's the effect of your cultivation. It's going to be a lot worse. Use it if you can. Lin Yi smiled bitterly. At this time, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai were a little embarrassed. Lin Yi had given them the best cave abodes, but he had to go to the spiritual jade mine to cultivate. That was really tough. One had to know that the heaven and earth spiritual chi in the spirit jade mine might even be similar to the cave abode number 10 at the foot of the mountain. However, it was impossible to let you sit cross-legged and cultivate in peace inside. You had to work all the time. In this way, doing two things at the same time would greatly reduce the effect of cultivation. Therefore, for ordinary people, they would rather go to the cave abode number 13 than the spiritual jade mine. It was just that Lin Yi's cave abode number 14 was a little weak. Perhaps that was why Lin Yi had to make such a bad decision. Brother Lin, why don't we go to mine? You should come to our cave abode. Xiao Hongkai and Xiao Ran looked at each other, and said at the same time, There's no need, hee. What's more, we have to change it now. Senior brother Meng will definitely not be happy, so he will find an excuse to make trouble for me. You don't want me to be scolded, right? Lin Yi smiled. This? Xiao Honkai and Xiao Ran thought about it and agreed. Okay, I'll go back first. You guys go back and cultivate early too. Lin Yi nodded. After saying goodbye to the three of them, he turned around and went back to his cave abode. He couldn't wait to do the spiritual jade experiment that he had anticipated. However, as soon as he arrived at the entrance of the cave, Lin Yi stopped because he found that the forbidden spell that covered the entrance of his cave abode had disappeared. Generally speaking, this kind of cave abode forbidden spell was not effective forever, but it was impossible to lose its effect in a short period of time. The forbidden spell of the welcoming pavilion was rearranged after the newcomers arrived. It was far from losing its effect. Lin Yi's heart suddenly moved. Could it be that the forbidden spell of my cave abode was broken by someone? Although he didn't master this kind of cave abode forbidden spell, according to common sense, if the forbidden spell of the cave abode didn't automatically lose its effect, then there was only one possibility left. Thinking of this, Lin Yi quickly walked into his cave abode. At the same time, he felt a little lucky in his heart. Fortunately, he had the space of the jade pendant, and didn't leave anything valuable in this cave abode. Otherwise, if someone broke in without knowing it, it would be a great loss. However, when he walked into the cave abode, his eyes suddenly froze. His cave abode was empty, and there were no furnishings. No matter what was inside, it was obvious at a glance. At this moment, in front of him, in the most conspicuous place in the center of the cave abode, there were two pieces of white and crystal-clear spiritual jade. Compared to Lin Yi's own egg-sized spiritual jade, the two pieces in front of him were much bigger. They were far above the average size. The biggest piece looked familiar to Lin Yi. After a while, he recalled that one of them was the one that Meng Jiuguang had given to Meng Tong. At this moment, there was a sudden noise outside. As there was no forbidden spell of the cave abode, Lin Yi heard it clearly. The noise came from the 15th cave abode at the foot of the mountain next door, and its owner was Meng Tong. Ninth cousin, you have to help me. My cave abode forbidden spell was broken by someone, and even the spiritual jade that you gave me was stolen. Meng Tong wailed loudly. Suddenly, it attracted the other newcomers who hadn't had time to close the cave abode, and they all gathered around to watch the show. At the same time, another wail came from another place. It was from Li Jingning, who occupied the second cave abode at the foot of the mountain. In Lin Yi's impression, he was the closest to Meng Tong among all the newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion. As such, he had received a lot of care from Meng Jiuguang. Whether it was the cave abode or the spiritual jade, they were all very good. Senior brother Meng, my cave abode forbidden spell was also broken by someone. My spiritual jade was also stolen. Li Jingning wailed loudly with a face full of despair. Could it be that he had really attracted an outsider? The moment this was said, the newcomers who were just watching the show were immediately shocked. They all went back to check on their cave abodes and precious items. If they were like these two and had their spiritual jade stolen, they would really want to cry, but no tears would come. Chapter 3582. So that's how it is. Lin Yi's mouth couldn't help but curve up. When he heard this, he already knew what the other party was going to do. No wonder Meng Jiuguang and the others were muttering about something fishy. They even specifically pointed out that stealing from the welcome pavilion would result in crippling the meridians of one's limbs. They were actually trying to frame them. Who else? Meng Jiuguang raised his voice and yelled again. After the inspection, the newcomers who came out shook their heads. Their cave abodes were still safe and sound. Nothing was lost inside. While they heaved a sigh of relief, all of them had relaxed expressions as though they were watching a show. The cultivation world was like this. If it didn't concern them, they would hang it up. Whoever lost it would be unlucky. As long as they didn't lose it, it was fine. Not only that, although Meng Tong and Li Jingming weren't in the limelight like Lin Yi, they were still people that Meng Jiuguang paid special attention to. Seeing such a good cave abode and spiritual jades being taken away by them, It would be a lie if the other newcomers said they weren't jealous. At this moment, all of them were gloating. Gloating my ass? They were just a bunch of fools who didn't know they were being played by others. Meng Tong secretly cursed. He made up his mind that after he dealt with Lin Yi, he would deal with this bunch of people who didn't have eyes. He would let them see clearly who was the boss here. It seems like no one else was robbed, right? Meng Jiuguang deliberately swept his eyes around. Seeing that no one spoke, he said loudly, "The theft of spiritual jades is not a small matter. According to the rules of our welcome pavilion, this matter must be thoroughly investigated. The culprit must be arrested and punished severely. Senior brother Meng is wise. You have to catch this damn thief and give us justice." Meng Tong and Li Jingming immediately shouted in unison. "Humph, no one has ever been able to fool me, Meng Jiuguang." Meng Jiuguang curled his lips and snorted coldly. Then, he faced the crowd and said, "First of all, we can be sure of one thing. Since this thief stole spirit jades and specifically targeted Meng Tong and Li Jingming, it is clear that he is quite familiar with you people." The rookies looked at each other when they heard that. Moments later, they came to a realization and nodded their heads. Among all the rookies, Meng Tong and Li Jingming had the largest spirit jades. This was something all the rookies knew. However, other than them, it was unlikely for outsiders to know of this situation. It could be said that it was purely a blind cat meeting a dead mouse. Purely relying on luck, they picked the two caves of Meng Tong and Li Jingming. This was too much of a coincidence. Could it be that the real culprit who stole the spirit jades was among the rookies? This thought suddenly appeared in the minds of all the rookies. The more they thought about it, the more likely it was. After all, only they knew who had the largest spirit jades. Moreover, only rookies who lacked cultivation resources would take the risk for 1 or 2 pieces of spirit jades, right? After successfully provoking everyone's doubts, Meng Jiuguang smiled proudly. Then, he pretended to be impartial and said, "As your senior brother in charge, from my heart, I absolutely believe that every one of you is a man of good character. You will definitely not ruin the reputation of our Blue Cloud Pavilion. However, since this kind of thing has happened, before we go and investigate the outsiders, we must first be upright and upright. We must first be upright and upright. Only when there are no problems on our side can we have the confidence to investigate outsiders. Don't you think so? Senior brother Meng is right." The group of rookies replied in unison. If one did not do anything wrong, they would not be afraid of ghosts knocking on the door. Anyway, this matter was not done by them. Meng Jiuguang could investigate however he wanted. Who knows, there might really be a good show to watch. That's good. We will start investigating from our own people. Meng Jiuguang smiled as if he had succeeded in his scheme. He deliberately analyzed. In theory, the forbidden spells of your caves are enough to block the full attack of a peak late-stage heaven stage expert. In other words, to easily destroy the forbidden spells of Meng Tong and Li Jingming's caves, one must at least be a peak late-stage heaven stage expert. Moreover, it must be a very powerful peak late-stage heaven stage expert. As soon as he said this, the group of rookies suspiciously looked at Lin Yi, who was standing at the entrance of cave number 14. In the entire Blue Cloud Pavilion, there were only 3 peak late-stage heaven stage experts. Other than Meng Tong, there were only Lin Yi and Xiao Ran from the secular world. Xiao Ran had always been quiet, so no one paid much attention to him. On the other hand, Lin Yi had become everyone's focus on the first day. Moreover, he had a deep grudge with Meng Tong. Now that there was a problem, the first person to suspect was naturally him. "Junior brother Lin, it's not that I'm targeting you on purpose, but there's a reason for this. I believe you can understand." Meng Jiuguang brought his people to Lin Yi and said with a fake smile, "Moreover, your cave is the closest to Meng Tong's cave. It is understandable for us to suspect you." Senior brother Ku, Xiao Ran, and Xiao Hongkai saw that the situation was not right. They hurriedly wanted to stop them, but they did not know how to help. They could not stop Meng Jiuguang from bringing people to search. That would not be helping Lin Yi, but harming Lin Yi. This was a blatant attempt to hide something. Fortunately, Lin Yi gave them a reassuring look, which made them feel more at ease. With Lin Yi's character, he would not do such a shameless and brainless thing. Of course I understand. Lin Yi nodded lightly and said, But Senior Brother Meng, I did not have time to say that my cave's forbidden spell was also broken. When everyone heard that, there was an uproar. Even Lin Yi's cave had suffered a calamity. This matter was a little complicated. Your cave's forbidden spell was also broken? Meng Jiuguang raised his eyebrows and said with a smile. Did Junior Brother Lin lose something? No, I don't have anything valuable to lose. Unlike Ming Tong and the rest, my spiritual jades are small and easy to carry around. Lin Yi's tone was as calm as usual, but everyone could hear the sarcasm in his words. This made the newcomers feel the same way. After all, when it came to the distribution of the spiritual jades, Meng Jiuguang was too biased. The victim was not only Lin Yi, but they were also unhappy. Everyone was a newcomer. Why did Ming Tong and the rest get the biggest spiritual jades, while they got the smaller ones? Chapter 3583. After that, Meng Jiuguang gave the bitter guy a meaningful look. It should be known that only masters in the foundation establishment stage could break the restriction of the cave residence. He first framed Lin Yi, and then took advantage of the situation to say that the bitter guy was an accomplice. After all, Lin Yi was only a master in the peak realm. He should have an accomplice, right? Then the bitter guy was the best candidate. Although Meng Jiuguang's current predicament could not hinder him, once the welcoming pavilion was replaced by his own people, then Clear Cloud Pavilion's territory would become his, Meng Jiuguang's, independent kingdom. Meng Tong and Li Jingming answered and broke into Lin Yi's cave residence with a grim smile. Lin Yi didn't stop them and let them search. Anyway, there was nothing else in the cave residence. He wanted to see how these guys would get out of this situation later. Letting Meng Tong and Li Jingming go in to search, Meng Jiuguang himself blocked Lin Yi at the door with a sneer, in case Lin Yi would do something desperate after Meng Tong and Li Jingming found the stolen goods later. However, Meng Jiuguang waited for a long time, but he still saw these two people looking everywhere inside. They didn't find the stolen goods that they had prepared before. He thought these two people were deliberately pretending. He immediately rolled his eyes. I've already done enough foreplay. Why are you still pretending at this time? He couldn't wait to see the wonderful expression of Lin Yi after his tendons and veins were destroyed. He couldn't help but say angrily, What are you two doing? Hurry up and come out! Meng Tong and Li Jingming looked at each other with sweat on their foreheads. After hearing Meng Jiuguang's urging, they didn't believe it and glanced around the whole cave residence again, but it was still empty. In fact, this cave residence was so big. Even if he searched 100 times, he wouldn't be able to find it. Thus, they could only turn their heads towards Meng Jiuguang with an expression as if they had seen a ghost. They spread out their hands and said with a bitter smile, Senior Brother Meng. No. No? How could he not? Meng Jiuguang stopped in a hurry. There were so many people watching outside. If he was not careful, he would have almost exposed himself. He immediately straightened his face and said, Both of you come and watch him. I will search personally. Yes. Meng Tong and Li Jingming hastily stood on either side of Lin Yi, one on the left and one on the right. Meng Jiuguang strode into the cave and began to search it himself. As for Lin Yi, he didn't seem to be dissatisfied with this. He just stood at the side and watched calmly. Meng Jiuguang glanced around. The cave residence was empty. Everything could be seen in a panoramic view. In fact, he didn't even need to search to know. But indeed, as Meng Tong and Li Jingming said, he couldn't find the stolen goods at all. That shouldn't be the case. It had been arranged long ago. How could it not be? The cave residence was only so big. It was difficult to even hide a piece of spiritual jade. It should be a piece of cake to search for something. Meng Jiuguang was suspicious. He turned his head and saw Lin Yi's calm expression at the door. Suddenly his heart moved. So that was it. This kid must have thought of a way to hide the spiritual jade on his body. That was why he dared to be so fearless. Both of you, search his body. Meng Jiuguang grinned maliciously. He had already guessed the whole story. It must be that after Lin Yi came back and found the spiritual jade, he knew something was wrong. So he thought of a way to hide it on his body. At this time, he could still pretend to be so calm. This kid could be considered a talent. But it was a pity that old Ginger was spicier. That's right, why didn't we think of that? Meng Tong and Meng Jiuguang's eyes suddenly lit up. Then, they stretched out their hands to search Lin Yi. The spiritual jade was such a big thing. No matter how well he hid it, once he was searched, he would definitely not be able to hide it. Lin Yi's expression changed slightly. Although this matter was not risky for him, being searched so unscrupulously was not his usual style of doing things. However, Meng Jiuguang seemed to have seen through his intentions. He sneered and threatened. If you don't want to be identified as a thief, junior brother Lin better cooperate. Otherwise, according to the rules of the Welcome Pavilion, if a suspect refuses to cooperate, we, the steward's senior brothers, can make an exception and attack you. It doesn't matter if you are dead or alive. Think about it carefully. Okay. If that's the case, then I'll have to trouble the two of you to search more carefully. Otherwise, when the time comes, you will say that you didn't search carefully and continue to put the suspicion on me. Lin Yi hesitated for a moment. He came to Heaven Stage Island with a purpose. If he broke some rules and was chased away, then the gains would not make up for the losses. Meng Jiuguang's strength was stronger than senior brother Ku Bai's. He should be an expert at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm. Lin Yi himself was only at the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm. Although he might be able to fight, if it was not necessary, Lin Yi did not want to expose his strength in public. Moreover, if he made a move at this time, it would be easy for him to become a laughingstock. Then, it would be really hard to explain. However, since they were willing to search, then let them search. In any case, if they could not find the spiritual jade, then it would not be Lin Yi's face that would be lost, but their own. Thus, he smiled very indifferently and said, "It just so happens that it can help me clear the suspicion. I have always remembered senior brother Meng's teachings, to be a righteous person. Humph, that goes without saying. Don't think that everything will be fine just because you hid it on your body. You country bumpkin, just wait to cry." Meng Tong and Li Jingming searched Lin Yi's body from head to toe. Suddenly, Meng Tong fished out a spiritual jade from Lin Yi's pocket. He laughed proudly and said, "I found it. Let's see what you can say now." The onlookers suddenly became alert. However, after seeing the size of the spiritual jade in his hand, their eyes all became strange. Then, they heard Lin Yi say jokingly, "Look carefully, this is my spiritual jade. When did Brother Meng's spiritual jade become so small and exquisite?" F***ck. Amidst the laughter, Meng Tong then realized that the spiritual jade was only the size of a chicken's egg. It did not belong to him, or Li Jingming at all. Meng Jiuguang's face turned green with anger. Could this idiot still do something reliable? Taking such a guy as a younger brother, he was losing all his face. Meng Tong immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. His face turned red, but no matter how hard he and Li Jingming searched, they couldn't find anything else on Lin Yi's body other than this piece of spirit jade. "Idiot! I'll do it myself!" Meng Jiuguang impatiently pulled Meng Tong to the side. It should be easy for him to do it himself. Why was it so unreliable when it came to this guy? However, Meng Jiuguang searched himself and still could not find it. He did not believe it and searched again, but still could not find it. Lin Yi raised his arms and looked at him. He asked weakly, "Senior brother Meng, this should be enough to prove my innocence, right? I am indeed the most upright person, right?" Meng Jiuguang had already forgotten to answer. His face was full of disbelief. How could it not be found? This was impossible. Since the two pieces of spiritual jades were not hidden in the Immortal's cave, then they must be hidden on his body. No matter how brilliant his concealment technique was, it was impossible for him to not be able to find the 2 pieces of spiritual jades. Chapter 3584. Apart from that, Meng Jiaguang felt that it was impossible to hide something as big as the spiritual jade on one's body without anyone noticing. Moreover, no one could find it no matter how hard they searched, unless they ate it. But if one ate the spiritual jade directly, even a cultivator would die if they swallowed something indigestible. Meng Jiaguang would never have thought that Lin Yi had a jade space that could store things. And at this moment, the 2 pieces of spiritual jade were lying quietly in his jade space. Senior Meng, do you still want to search? I don't care. You can search as much as you want, as long as you can prove my innocence in the end. Lin Yi looked at the ashen-faced Meng Jiaguang and continued to say innocently. Could it be that this kid had never seen the 2 pieces of spiritual jade at all, so he was so fearless? Meng Jiaguang looked at Lin Yi suspiciously. Suddenly, he thought of another more likely possibility. Such a big piece of spiritual jade would definitely not disappear into thin air. Since it could not be found on Lin Yi, it must have been taken away by someone else. No need. Junior Lin, you are innocent. You are an upright person. Don't be angry. I am just doing my job. Let's go to other caves and search again. Looking at Lin Yi's indifferent expression at the moment, Meng Jiaguang felt as disgusted as if he had eaten a fly. Moreover, it was the kind of big fly that was stuck on cow dung all day long. Ah? Go to other caves and search? Meng Tong and Li Jingming looked at each other. It turned out that there was no such step in the plan. But looking at Meng Jiaguang's extremely ugly expression at the moment, the 2 of them did not dare to say anything more. They hurriedly responded and went out. Searching all the caves one by one, Meng Jiaguang had no other choice. After all, the previous words had been released. He had to first check his own people. Now that there was nothing fishy on Lin Yi's body. In order to be fair, even if it was just a formality, they had to search the others as well. What's more, after thinking about the idea that had just popped up, Meng Jiaguang was indeed suspicious of the other newcomers present. Previously, when Meng Tong had placed the spiritual jades into Lin Yi's cave abode, he had been discovered by someone and had secretly taken away the 2 pieces of spiritual jades. This was not impossible. However, after carefully searching all the other rookies in their cave abodes, he paid special attention to the 2 accomplices of Lin Yi, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai. The 2 pieces of spirit jade were still nowhere to be seen, not even the slightest trace could be found. This time, Meng Jiaguang was really in a difficult position. He tried so hard to trick Lin Yi, but he failed. Instead, he lost Meng Tong and Li Jingming's spiritual jades. This was simply going for wool and coming home shorn. However, even though he was in a bad mood, he still had to say some polite words. Meng Jiaguang could only bite the bullet and say, "Very good. Since there are no problems after checking our own people, as the eldest senior brother in charge, I am very pleased. I will report the matter of the theft of the spiritual jades to the pavilion master to continue investigating. All of you are dismissed. Do what you need to do." When everyone heard that, they could only disperse. They did not see the good show that they had imagined. At this moment, all of them still looked like they had not had enough. "Junior apprentice brother bitter guy, you should fix up the forbidden spells of the 3 of them," Meng Jiaguang casually instructed. Following that, he pulled Meng Tong and Li Jingming to the side with a gloomy expression. From his point of view, today's matter had most likely landed on his own people. Meng Tong and Li Jingming followed Meng Jiaguang to an empty corner and said with a bitter expression, "Ninth cousin, what should we do now? What are we going to do now? We didn't get Lin Yi, but we lost our spirit jades. How are we going to train from now on?" When Meng Jiaguang heard that, he stared coldly at Meng Tong and said with a fierce expression, "Meng Tong, I will give you a chance. Tell me honestly, did you stuff your own pockets with the 2 spiritual jades? You didn't put the spiritual jades in Lin Yi's cave abode, did you?" "Ah?" Meng Tong was depressed at this time. When he heard Meng Jiaguang's words, he was shocked. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Ninth cousin, how can you say that? Do I look like that kind of person to you? You don't look like it, but now the two spiritual jades have disappeared for no reason. Linny didn't have it, nor did anyone else. Then I can only think of the last possibility. That is, you did something to stuff your own pockets," Meng Jiaguang said sharply. Although Li Jingming was also a participant in the plan to kill Lin Yi, he only provided a piece of spiritual jades from the beginning to the end. Meng Jiaguang took advantage of the opportunity when Lin Yi left to secretly destroy the forbidden spell of Lin Yi's cave abode. In the end, the person who was really responsible for putting the spiritual jades was Meng Tong. If there was really a traitor, Meng Tong was the most likely. Meng Tong was so scared that he wanted to cry but had no tears. "Ninth cousin, you can't wrong me like this. I really didn't steal the hidden spiritual jades. If you don't believe me, you can search me." Meng Jiaguang glanced at Li Jingming. Li Jingming immediately understood and searched Meng Tong's body. After searching him up and down, he didn't find any spiritual jades. Seeing this, Meng Jiaguang's eyes couldn't help but soften a little. Meng Tong finally breathed a sigh of relief. However, he heard Li Jingming still have some doubts. Could it be hidden somewhere else outside? "Li Jingming, what do you mean? Even you dare to doubt me?" Meng Tong was suddenly angry. He grabbed Li Jingming's collar and growled, "You want to provoke me and ninth cousin, and then benefit from it, right? No, Tong, listen to me. I'm just a little unwilling to lose the spiritual jades. I really didn't mean to doubt you," Li Jingming hurriedly explained, but as for what he was thinking in his heart, no one knew except him. Sure enough, after listening to Li Jingming's words, Meng Jiaguang looked at Meng Tong with a sharp gaze again. Meng Tong saw that the situation was not good, so he quickly threw away Li Jingming and explained, "Ninth cousin, one of the two pieces of spiritual jades is my own. Do you think I will betray you for greed of Li Jingming's half-used spiritual jades? Even if I am stupid, I will never do such a stupid thing." "That's true." Meng Jiaguang nodded thoughtfully. Although he didn't believe in Meng Tong's character, it was not worthwhile to betray him just for greed for half a piece of spiritual jades. After all, with the relationship between Meng Tong and himself, it would be easy to get more spiritual jades in the future. There was no need to take such a risk. So, I think it is very likely that an outsider sneaked in during the time we went to the market. After all, this cave house's forbidden curse is gone. It would be easy to steal the two pieces of spiritual jades. Meng Tong quickly struck while the iron was hot, for fear that Meng Jiaguang would continue to doubt him. Chapter 3585. Senior Brother Meng, what should we do now? Without spiritual jades, what will we use to cultivate next? Li Jingming said with a bitter face. Although Meng Tong hated Li Jingming for daring to search him just now, he felt the same way when he heard this. He said with a depressed expression, "Yes, ninth cousin, I still have to fight with Lin Yi next month. What should I do?" Meng Jiaguang looked at the two of them dejectedly, and sighed helplessly. "Speaking of this matter, it was my fault for not being considerate enough. That's why outsiders took advantage of this loophole. How about this? The two of you will follow me back to my cave and take a piece of spirit jade each as compensation. In the future, as long as you follow me well, I will not let you suffer any losses. Senior Brother Meng is wise. In the future, we will definitely obey your orders." The two were overjoyed and hurriedly showed their loyalty. They massaged his shoulders and back and flattered him. Meng Jiaguang appeared to be generous and open-minded on the surface, but in his heart, he was secretly distressed. For a senior brother who held great power, although spiritual jades were not as difficult to obtain as the newcomers, taking out two spiritual jades at once was enough to make him feel distressed. This time, he tried his best but failed to cheat Lin Yi. Instead, he lost two spiritual jades. Just thinking about it made him feel unlucky. Fortunately, looking at the grateful appearance of Meng Tong and Li Jingming, these two spiritual jades were not given in vain. At least they could buy people's hearts. Meng Jiuguang secretly gritted his teeth. That damn Lin Yi, I must find another opportunity to kill him in the future. Repairing the cave house's forbidden spell was definitely an extremely bitter job, but since Meng Jiuguang had ordered it, senior brother Meng Jiuguang had to do it. With his strength in the early stage of foundation establishment, it took him a full hour to repair the forbidden spell of Lin Yi's cave house. After that, there were still Meng Tong and Li Jingming's cave houses waiting for him. You've worked hard, senior brother. Lin Yi opened his mouth to thank him, only to see his bitter senior brother waving his hand. Without even taking a sip of water, he directly ran to Meng Tong's cave dwelling number 15 at the foot of the mountain and began to busy himself. He was afraid that when Meng Jiuguang came back later, he would say that he was not diligent and deliberately slacking off. To be able to do this much as a senior brother in charge, there was no other senior brother in charge who could do this. Lin Yi shook his head speechlessly and turned to enter his cave residence. After deactivating the forbidden spell, he got down to business. His main task now was not to enter the space of the jade pendant to cultivate, but to experiment with the spirit jades. In order to verify whether the space in the jade pendant could charge the spirit jade, the first thing to do was to consume most of the spirit chi in the spirit jade. Only then could the most obvious effect be seen. According to Lin Yi's original plan, he was prepared to spend more time exhausting his spirit jade, but now he didn't need to do so. There were 2 ready-made pieces that were delivered to his doorstep. Looking back, he thought about Meng Jiuguang's group of people. It was simply doing a good deed without leaving his name. If there were to be a few more times in the future, he didn't even need to think about doing hard labor in the mines. As long as he stayed in the cave residence to pick up the spirit jades and throw them into the space of the jade pendant, everything would be fine. Lin Yi carefully felt the existing spirit chi in the 2 pieces of spirit jades. At least more than half of it had been used. It was just right to use them for experiments. The next thing to do was very simple. As long as he continued to keep the 2 pieces of spirit jades in the space of the jade pendant, he would check the results tomorrow morning. As for Lin Yi himself, he only needed to focus on his own cultivation. Although the next step was to refine the heavenly law golden pill. Then he could quickly break through to the peak of the early stage of the foundation building realm, but cultivation had always been sailing against the current. No matter how good the medicinal pills were, he still had to cultivate non-stop. Although Wang Xinyan played a big part in Lin Yi's achievements today, it was even more because of Lin Yi's years of diligent cultivation. As he entered the space of the jade pendant to cultivate, he waited for the results of the spirit jades to come out. What surprised and delighted Lin Yi was that after only 2 hours, the results were out. The spirit chi in the 2 pieces of spirit jades had become very full. The density of the spirit chi was the same as the density of the initial spirit jade Lin Yi had. In other words, the idea of using the space of the jade pendant to recharge the spirit jades was completely feasible. Before the experiment, the spirit chi in the 2 pieces of spirit jades had clearly been used up by more than half, but now, after only 2 hours, the spirit chi in the 2 pieces of spirit jades was already full. From the looks of it, even if the spirit chi in the jade was almost completely used up, when placed in the space of the jade pendant, it would at most be able to become a brand new piece of good jade in 4 hours. This effect felt even more obvious than when he recharged the energy stones in the mortal world. According to Lin Yi's speculation, this was probably because the spirit jades themselves were more suitable as carriers of the spirit chi of heaven and earth than the energy stones. Although the spirit jades could contain far more spirit chi than the energy stones, the speed at which they absorbed spirit chi was also much faster than the energy stones, so the effect of recharging them was actually faster than the energy stones. The space of the jade pendant was really an invincible artifact. In this way, for Lin Yi to solve the problem of not having enough spirit jades, it would be as easy as turning his hand over. In the future, he could use his own spirit jades that were full of spirit chi to exchange for other people's nearly used up waste jades. For example, he could use 1 good jade to exchange for 3 other people's waste jades. This kind of obviously taking advantage of others was definitely not something that people would do. After all, for the vast majority of people, No matter how many waste jades they held in their hands, they were just waste jades. They would never think that with Linny, waste jades could become good jades. In this way, 1 for 3, 3 for 9, 9 for 27. With this kind of artifact, the space of the jade pendant, Linny was equivalent to sitting on a treasure bowl. As long as he was careful and didn't get targeted, it would be easy for him to earn more spirit jades in the future. However, with Lin Yi's current identity and environment, if he did this kind of thing too often, it would still be a little risky. Firstly, the people he knew were all newcomers, and they didn't have much spirit jades in their hands. Not only did they not have good spirit jades that were full of spirit chi, they also had very few waste jades. After all, spirit jades were essentially the same as the energy stones in the mortal world. If they were completely exhausted without leaving a trace of spirit chi, the spirit jades would directly shatter, and from then on, they would no longer be able to absorb the spirit chi of heaven and earth. In this case, even if Linny exchanged them back, it would be useless. Chapter 3586. What's more, there was no lack of people around Linny. There was Meng Jueguang, Meng Tong, and Su Lingchong and Kong Mingming. They couldn't wait for Linny to make a mistake. However, although there was a risk, this kind of thing could still be done on a small scale. With people like Xiao Ran, Xiao Hongkai, and even senior brother Ku Kui, Linny didn't need to worry so much. If it was really a last resort, he could wear the 1,000 silk mask and go to the market to trade with people outside. In this way, even if there was a risk, others wouldn't suspect Linny. In addition to exchanging his own good jade for other people's waste jade, there was a more convenient and safe way in front of Linny now, the spirit jade mine. Using the concealment of the space of the jade pendant, during the mining process, Linny could hide a few pieces of spirit jade. Even if the spirit jade mine was strictly guarded, they would mainly look at the spirit jade that was full of aura. This kind of waste jade with only a little aura, presumably no one would be willing to pay too much attention to it. After careful consideration, the feasibility of doing this was higher than exchanging with others for spirit jade. After thinking about it in his mind, Linny finally made up his mind to explore the spirit jade mine first. As long as he figured out the process of the mine, it wouldn't be difficult to seize the opportunity to pick up a loophole. What's more, in the short term, Lin Yi's demand for spirit jade was not too high. He already had 3 pieces of spirit jade in his hand. If he wanted to get 5 pieces of spirit jade, it would be enough to buy the 5 kinds of medicinal materials to refine the Tian Nao golden pill. The night was silent until the next morning. Lin Yi and other newcomers who signed up for mining received the forbidden spell of the cave house and went out to gather. Looking at the group of excited newcomers in front of him, Meng Jueguang, the eldest senior brother in charge, had a long and dark face. Especially when he saw Lin Yi, he could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth. He was in a terrible mood. Yesterday, he went for wool and came home shorn. He still felt the pain of losing 2 pieces of spiritual jades. You will cry when you enter the mines. Meng Jueguang glared fiercely at Lin Yi, who acted as if nothing had happened. He was not in the mood to talk nonsense with this group of newcomers. He called the names one by one according to the registration list from yesterday. He immediately brought his men down to the mine. Although the spirit jade mine was located at the bottom of the mountain range, and strictly speaking, it was right below everyone's cave abode, the entrance to the spirit jade mine was not here. Not only was it not close to everyone's cave abode, but it was also quite far away. With everyone's strength being at least at the late stage of heaven rank, it took them almost half an hour to reach their destination. And it was very different from the clay mine that they had imagined. The entrance to the spirit jade mine was actually a magnificent pavilion. Its degree of magnificence was not below that of the welcome pavilion. The plaque in the middle was engraved with 3 dark golden words, Spirit Jade Hall. There were not many people coming in and out, but the security was tight. Although it was not as exaggerated as having a sentry every few steps. But cold-looking guards could be seen everywhere. What made Lin Yi secretly shocked was that the strength of any one of the guards here was at least at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment. In other words, the weakest guard here was an expert at the same level as Meng Jiaguang. It was the first time for the group of newcomers to come here. They could not help but look around curiously, but no matter where they were, even if they just took a few glances, they would immediately attract the stern eyes of the guards on the side, as if they would pounce on them in the next moment. They were so scared that they were silent, and no longer dared to look around. They could only obediently follow Meng Jiaguang and walk forward. Meng Jiaguang took a panoramic view of everyone's behavior. Seeing that everyone had suffered a setback and become well-behaved, Meng Jiaguang put on the dignified manner of a steward and explained. Like our Yingxin Pavilion, Spirit Jade Hall is one of the few departments on the North Island that are independent of the 3 pavilions. It is in charge of the mining of Spirit Jade mines and the distribution of Spirit Jade. It can be said that every piece of Spirit Jade on the North Island is taken from Spirit Jade Hall. Independent department? Lin Yi's heart moved slightly. It turned out that in addition to the 3 pavilions, there were other independent departments in the North Island of Heaven Stage Island. Welcome Pavilion was the concentration camp for newcomers, and Spirit Jade Hall was responsible for the Spirit Jade mines. Then, presumably, the other independent departments also had their own unique functions. At this time, a newcomer asked, Senior Brother Meng, you said before that there are Spirit Jade mines under these mountains. If that's the case, then anyone can find a hidden place to dig up Spirit Jade. Even if this Spirit Jade Hall wants to interfere, it can't do anything, right? The newcomers nodded thoughtfully when they heard this. Although this Spirit Jade Hall seemed to have a lot of manpower, and all of them were experts, the mines stretched across several mountains. Even if all the experts of Spirit Jade Hall were mobilized without rest, they might not be able to patrol all the mountains. Don't overestimate the moral integrity of a cultivator, and similarly, don't underestimate the courage of a cultivator. Spirit Jade could move people's hearts. No matter how strong Spirit Jade Hall was, it could not stop the cultivator's pursuit of Spirit Jade. Find a hidden place to secretly dig up Spirit Jade. Not to mention others, even the weakest Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers present could not help but have this kind of idea. Find a hidden place to secretly dig up Spirit Jade? Heh, dream on! Meng Jiaguang sneered and looked at all the newcomers as if he was looking at idiots. After finding a sense of superiority, he explained, Don't think that the mines are spread all over the mountain range, as if you can find Spirit Jade by digging a few 100 feet. In fact, wherever there are Spirit Jade mines, the top experts of the 3 pavilions have already set up arrays. Places that are covered by the arrays, don't talk about digging up Spirit Jade, you can't even dig up a piece of mud. Instead, you will suffer the backlash of the arrays. If it's light, you will be seriously injured, and if it's heavy, you will lose your life. You can dig up Spirit Jade, but you cannot shake the foundation of the mountain range. Otherwise, if the foundation is destroyed, no one can cultivate in peace in the cave abode. Hiss! All the newcomers immediately drew in a cold breath. Needless to say, some of them really did have this idea. It was just that they had not familiarized themselves with the environment for the past 2 days, so they did not have the time to do it. Now that they heard Meng Jiaguang's words, they immediately felt a lingering fear. If anyone had the guts to do it 2 days ago, they would probably be lying in the wilderness now. Chapter 3587. After all, he was the eldest senior apprentice brother in charge of this group of Clear Cloud Pavilion's new disciples. If something went wrong with them and was found out, then as the eldest senior apprentice brother, he would also be held responsible. Worse, he might even be accused of incompetence in teaching the new disciples and be directly replaced. Senior Meng, rest assured. We will definitely not dare to spoil the reputation of Blue Cloud Pavilion. The rookies shivered and hurriedly swore in unison. Meng Jiaguang nodded and glanced maliciously at Lin Yi, who was following behind the crowd. If it was anyone else who had a problem, he would be afraid of being implicated, but if it was Lin Yi, he would be more than happy. Compared to this bit of risk, being able to get rid of Lin Yi was something to be happy about. However, this was something he could only think about in his head. After what happened yesterday, he wouldn't dare to do anything to Lin Yi for the time being. However, it wasn't a bad idea to find an opportunity to mess with this guy. Meng Jiuguang led the crowd through a long corridor. According to the constantly descending terrain, they should already be underground. However, on the two sides of the walls, there were naturally glowing fluorites embedded in them every 20 feet. Although the surroundings were claustrophobic, it was as bright as the outside. Moments later, Meng Jiuguang stopped in his tracks. Looking at the door that was more than 30 feet tall, the rookies could not help but swallow their saliva. From the looks of it, behind this door was the legendary Spirit Jade Mine. After passing through this door, you will enter the Spirit Jade Mine's mining area. However, before entering, you have to follow me over there to sign a contract. Meng Jiuguang pointed to the side of the door, where there was a table and a few cabinets. The cabinets were filled with countless white paper contracts, and behind the tables sat a white-bearded old man who was drowsily dozing off. Meng Jiuguang led the crowd over. After patting the elder's shoulder, the white-bearded elder opened his eyes and looked at Meng Jiuguang with a smile. "Junior Meng, it's you. Why? These are the rookies of our Blue Cloud Pavilion this year? Not bad." Meng Jiuguang nodded, and then introduced Dai Wuchang to everyone. "This is Senior Brother Dai Wuchang from our Blue Cloud Pavilion, and is now in charge of contracts in Jade Spirit Hall. Why don't you quickly greet Senior Brother Dai?" "Greetings, Senior Brother Dai." The newcomers hurriedly greeted. Although this old man who was acting as Senior Brother Wuchang looked quite old, but because his strength was only at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment, according to the rules of the cultivation world, this person's seniority was similar to that of Meng Jiuguang. Everyone only had to call him Senior Brother. However, the current Hellguard was an old man. Since it wasn't absorbed by the Profound Pavilion, it must be a very weak existence. The Profound Pavilion didn't care for it, which was why it came to the Blue Cloud Pavilion, a waste collection point. Dai Wuchang nodded, turned to look at Meng Jiuguang, and said, "Junior Brother Meng, how many contracts do you want this time, and what mines do you want?" Meng Jiuguang calculated, and said, "I'll have to trouble Senior Brother Dai to give me 2 for the 7th mine, and 10 for the 8th mine. 1 for the 10th mine. All right, I'll give it to you." "Wait, the 10th mine? You also want the 10th mine?" Dai Wuchang suddenly froze. He looked at Meng Jiuguang in surprise and said, "Junior Brother Meng, you're wrong, you want to say the 9th mine, right?" Meng Jiuguang shook his head, and looked at Lin Yi with a sneer, and said, "Senior Brother Dai, you didn't hear wrong. I want the 10th mine, that's a public mine, there shouldn't be a problem, right?" Following Meng Jiuguang's gaze, he looked at Lin Yi. Only then did Dai Wuchang understand that this guy was going to make a fool of him. He laughed and shook his head, and said indifferently, "Of course there's no problem, the 10th mine is publicly recognized as a dead mine, and I'm worried that no one will mine it. I'll prepare it for you." "Public mine? Dead mine? Senior Brother Ku, what's going on?" Lin Yi felt that there must be something fishy in this, and turned to ask Senior Brother Ku next to him. Although Senior Brother Ku didn't have the right to speak in this kind of matter, in case Lin Yi was cheated and didn't know it, he deliberately followed today. Even if he couldn't help Lin Yi, at least he could help him understand the situation, so as to avoid blindly suffering losses. Senior Brother Ku shook his head helplessly, sighed, and then explained to Lin Yi. "According to the amount and density of the spiritual jades, Spirit Jade Hall divided the entire vein into 10 mining areas. From good to bad, they are number 1 to 10. The smaller the number, the higher the quality of the mining area. According to the established rules, the 1st to 3rd mining areas are in the center of the mountain range, and belong to the disciples of Soaring Sky Pavilion. The 4th to 6th mining areas are outside the center of the mountain range, and belong to the disciples of Mysterious Pavilion. The 7th to 9th mining areas are in the periphery of the mountain range, and belong to the disciples of Blue Cloud Pavilion. As for the 10th mining area, it is the outer public mining area, and the disciples of the 3 pavilions can go in and mine. At the same time, although there are spiritual jades in the 10th mining area, they are extremely rare, and only a few pieces are dug out in a year. Even if they are dug out, they are waste jades with thin spiritual chi. Ordinary people are not willing to go in and waste their time, and it is very difficult to see people all year round, so it is called the dead mining area. The quality of the mining area corresponds to the spirit chi in the mountain range. This is also the reason why the Soaring Sky Pavilion's abode is the best. Below the abode is the best mining area. At this point, even the honest senior brother Kubai couldn't help but say angrily, I originally thought that no matter how much senior brother Meng targeted you, he would at most assign you to the 9th mining area. That way, no matter how low the jade yield is, there would still be some harvest. I didn't expect him to assign you to the 10th mining area. This is too much. Junior brother Lin, let's go. There's really no need to waste time in this kind of place. I didn't expect that senior brother bitter bully, who has always meekly accepted all kinds of adversity, would actually have an angry side. It's really rare. Amidst the laughter, Linny was also a little touched in his heart. He patted his senior's shoulder and comforted him. It's all right. Since we're already here, let's take things as they come. Even if it's a dead mining area, it's not impossible to mine spiritual jades. Moreover, if we flee at the last minute and become a coward, wouldn't we be making a fool out of ourselves? No matter what, I have to see what this spirit jade mine looks like. Chapter 3588. I have to work for at least 3 months? Lin Yi was slightly stunned. Not only him, but the rookies beside him who had heard the conversation between the two also had a change in expression. Following that, they began to whisper worriedly. 3 months was neither long nor short. For cultivators with long lifespans, even if 3 months passed in vain without any harvest, it was not a big deal. But for the rookies present, the meaning of these 3 months was completely different. Don't forget, if they want to enter the Blue Cloud Pavilion, they must succeed in building their foundation within a year, and 3 months is already a quarter of a year. Once they signed the contract, it meant that in the next 3 months, compared to newcomers like Xiao Ran who had never come to mine, their cultivation progress would inevitably be slower. After all, even if the spiritual energy in the spirit jade mine was naturally rich, they would not be able to focus on cultivation, and the effect would inevitably be greatly reduced. But then again, if they could earn enough spiritual jades in these 3 months, they wouldn't suffer a loss. Because this would lay a solid foundation for their cultivation in the next 9 months. At that time, their cultivation would be much better than that of Xiao Ran and the others. It was entirely possible for them to catch up. As long as they succeeded in building their foundation, they would be the victors. In the end, signing this mining contract was a gamble. If he could gather enough spiritual jades in the next 3 months, he would win. If the number of spirit jades collected was too little, or even if there was no harvest at all, then it would be a loss, and a huge loss at that. However, if the other rookies could be said to have some wins and losses in this gamble, then for Lin Yi, who was about to be assigned to mine number 10, it was a different story. He would lose without a doubt. In these 3 months, as long as the others were a little more diligent, they would be able to make it. If he was lucky, he might be able to earn 7 or 8 pieces of spiritual jades. Even if he was unlucky, he could earn at least 4 or 5 pieces. However, in mining area number 10, a notoriously dead mining area, after 3 months, Linny might not even be able to earn a single piece of spiritual jade. In fact, according to past experiences, not to mention good jades full of spiritual chi, even waste jades with thin spiritual chi were scarce in the number 10 dead mining area. If one wanted to collect 100 pieces of good jades in this kind of place to exchange for rewards, it would be extremely difficult. This was simply a fool's dream. If it was anyone else who heard of this situation, they would definitely wisely choose to retreat at this moment. It was better to be a coward that ran away at the last moment than to waste 3 months of precious cultivation time for nothing. If they still braced themselves and continued to fight at this moment, then there was simply something wrong with their brains. However, Linny had no intention of backing down. He didn't come here for the reward of mining. Since there were very few spirit jades in the 10th dead mine, it was likely that the supervision there would not be as strict as the other mines. Instead, it would be easier for him to tamper with it. In other words, what Linny wanted now was waste jade. If he really traded it for a good mining area with a high yield of spirit jade, he would be closely monitored. That would be troublesome. However, it was obviously impossible for Senior Brother Bitter Guy to know Lin Yi's plan. Seeing that Lin Yi had a relaxed expression from beginning to end, he couldn't help but anxiously stomp his feet again and again. For Lin Yi, who was one of the few junior brothers who respected him from the bottom of his heart, Senior Brother Bitter Guy really didn't want him to suffer losses from the bottom of his heart. Especially when it was such an obvious loss. He tried to persuade Lin Yi a few more times, but he couldn't persuade him no matter what. In the end, Senior Brother Bitter Guy gritted his teeth and braced himself to walk towards Meng Jiuguang and Dai Wucheng. Seeing Senior Brother Bitter Guy squeezing his way over, Meng Jiuguang looked at him in surprise. In the past few years, he was used to seeing Senior Brother Bitter Guy's submissive appearance, but he had never seen such a firm expression on Senior Brother Bitter Guy's face. He even felt a little imposing aura. This meek trash actually has an imposing aura? Meng Jiuguang couldn't help but be amused by this strange thought that emerged from the bottom of his heart. He curled his lips and said, "Junior Brother Bitter Guy, what are you trying to do?" Unexpectedly, Senior Brother Bitter didn't reply as respectfully as usual. He didn't even look at him. Instead, he directly said to Dai Wucheng, "Senior Brother Dai, please give me a copy of the contract of the 7th mining area." "Oh? Could it be that Junior Brother Bitter Guy also wants to mine jade? Could it be that the rules of the Welcome Pavilion have changed, and you, as stewards, can actually accept private work?" Dai Wucheng looked at Senior Brother Bitter Guy strangely. In order to prevent these stewards from neglecting their duties and neglecting their duty of teaching the newcomers, the Welcome Pavilion clearly stipulated that they were not allowed to accept any private work. After all, they already had a high monthly salary, which was enough for their daily cultivation expenses. If it was said that they were only going to the mine to supervise and maintain the order of the newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion, then that was fine. But if they wanted to mine the jade themselves, then that was not allowed. "No, I am asking for this contract for Junior Brother Lin." According to the rules, any steward has the authority to arrange contracts for the newcomers. There shouldn't be any problem with me doing this, right? Under the intense gaze of Meng Jiuguang, Senior Brother Bitter Guy finally braced himself and said this. This was the first time in several years that he publicly disobeyed Meng Jiuguang's intentions. "Oh? That's true, but..." Dai Wucheng was stunned, then turned to look at the gloomy expression of Meng Jiuguang. Although in theory Senior Brother Bitter Guy did have this authority, it had always been Meng Jiuguang who had the final say all these years. How could Senior Brother Bitter Guy have the right to speak? As for Lin Yi's arrangement, I have already decided just now. The contract for the 10th mine is prepared for him. Junior Brother Bitter Guy, you don't have to do anything unnecessary. Meng Jiuguang looked coldly at Senior Brother Bitter Guy and said. Although he was extremely annoyed, no matter what, the other party was still a steward at the same level as him. He could not directly flip out like he did with the newcomers. The 10th mine is publicly recognized as a dead mine. As the steward of the Welcome Pavilion, I have to be responsible for the cultivation of the newcomers. I think this is not good for Junior Brother Lin's future cultivation. Senior Brother Bitter Guy stuttered. In the face of Meng Jiuguang's years of accumulated power, Senior Brother Bitter Guy still felt a little weak in his heart, and even his words were not fluent. Meng Jiuguang bitterly gritted his teeth. Although he wanted to beat this 10,000-year-old coward up, with so many people watching, he could only suppress his anger in the bottom of his heart. After all, Senior Brother Bitter Guy's words were not without reason. At this time, let alone making a move, even if he said half a word wrong, it would be spread out that he was deliberately suppressing the newcomers. This was a very fatal stain for the steward. Chapter 3589. Senior Marshal Brother couldn't help but choke. He didn't expect that Meng Jiuguang didn't refute, but Dai Wuchang took the initiative to attack first. Little did he know that this Dai Wuchang and Meng Jiuguang were basically in the same boat. Seeing that Senior Marshal Brother was at a loss, Dai Wuchang continued to say with a cold face, "Just because you have a good relationship with a newcomer, you want to arrange a good mining area for him. Does this Spirit Jade Hall belong to your family?" This Senior Marshal Brother Kubai was speechless. However, Dai Wuchang continued to say, "Junior Marshal Brother, don't think that just because I came from Blue Cloud Pavilion, I can be unscrupulously partial to our own people from Blue Cloud Pavilion. On the contrary, in order to not let the people from the other two pavilions fall behind, I have to be stricter to my own people. This matter concerns the reputation and image of the entire Blue Cloud Pavilion. Don't blame me for not giving you face." These words were spoken righteously, and even dragged out the reputation and image of Blue Cloud Pavilion. Senior Marshal Brother was suddenly speechless. He was not a person who was good at talking. This time, he had already mustered up the courage to oppose. After being suddenly reprimanded by Dai Wuchang, he suddenly didn't know what to say. Meng Jiuguang looked at this scene with a face of contempt and complacency. A coward was a coward. Since he was a salted fish, he would never be able to make a comeback. Since Senior Marshal Brother Dai has said this, then as one of us, we can't make things difficult for him for our own selfish interests, right? Meng Jiuguang pretended to be open-minded as he turned to Lin Yi with a cold smile. "Lin Yi, I'll say it up front. The 10th mine's contract is yours, and if you're thinking of backing out like a coward, you'll have to face the consequences. If you want to retreat like a tortoise, then I won't blame you. After all, take a step back and you can see the world. This is Junior Marshal Brother Dai's mantra. You have followed him for a few days, I think you can learn a little essence, ha ha ha." Everyone chimed in and roared with laughter. In any case, it was Lin Yi who was thrown into the number 10 dead mine. Since it had nothing to do with him, of course they were happy to see such a lively scene. In fact, the rookies were quite dissatisfied with being assigned to the 8th mine and not the better 7th mine. However, they did not dare to challenge Meng Jiuguang. Therefore, he could only seek psychological comfort from Lin Yi, who was even more miserable. Being ridiculed in public like this, the bitter senior apprentice's face suddenly turned red, but the words he said just now had already exhausted all his courage. At this time, he simply did not dare to speak again. He could only look at Lin Yi, hoping that Lin Yi would be a wise man and not fight when the odds were against him, and quickly leave with him. However, Lin Yi just smiled. He looked calmly at the proud and arrogant Meng Jiuguang and said lightly, "At least I can learn something by following Senior Apprentice Brother Dai, but if I follow Senior Apprentice Brother Meng, not only will I not learn anything, I might even go for wool and come home shorn. It seems that it is better to follow Senior Apprentice Brother Dai. Go for wool and come home shorn." Meng Jiuguang's face suddenly changed. Lin Yi's words had poked at his sore spot. At this time, he was still feeling the pain of taking out the 2 pieces of spiritual jades yesterday. He looked at Lin Yi suspiciously, not knowing whether Lin Yi said those words unintentionally or deliberately poked at his sore spot. Of course, even if he knew that Lin Yi was deliberately poking at his sore spot, Meng Jiuguang at most thought that Lin Yi had seen through the framing scheme yesterday, but he did not expect that the 2 pieces of spiritual jades were actually hidden in the space of the jade pendant. Lin Yi did not continue to pay attention to him. He turned to Senior Apprentice Brother Dai and said, "Senior Apprentice Brother Dai, you don't have to worry about me. I know what I'm doing." As he said that, Lin Yi strode over to take the number 10 mining area contract from Dai Wuchang and signed his name directly. Sigh. Senior Apprentice Brother Dai shook his head helplessly, but it was too late to stop it now. He could only think of a way in the future to see how to make Lin Yi suffer less in the mining area. "Humph, you are indeed the strongest newcomer. You really have courage." Although Meng Jiuguang praised him, his eyes were full of schadenfreude. If Lin Yi was a coward at this time, then even if he was the Senior Apprentice Brother Dai Wuchang, he could only take advantage of Lin Yi verbally, but he could not really make Lin Yi suffer. But now Lin Yi actually signed the contract without saying anything, then he would have to suffer in the future. Even an unlucky bastard like Lin Yi, who'd been sent to the 10th mine, dared to sign the contract. The other newbies wouldn't back down either. 3 months it was, they'd just have to put in a little more effort, and there'd still be some profit. After everyone signed the contract, they were each given a jade card. The materials should be the worst quality of waste jade, and it was marked with a number. The others were number 7 and 8, but the one in Lin Yi's hand was number 10. The one in your hand is the pass token. The number marked on it will allow you to enter the mining area. Other mining areas are not allowed to enter. After Dai Wuchang explained to everyone, he then sat back in his seat. It was unknown what mechanism was pressed, but the huge iron door in front of everyone automatically opened. "All right, since you all have the pass token, then follow me in," Meng Jiuguang said and led the way into the door. Everyone looked at each other, and then followed. Behind the door was not the mining area that they had imagined, but a huge compartment. In the compartment, in addition to 4 uniformed guards, there were also 4 staff members who were responsible for searching the disciples entering and leaving. These staff members had all been specially trained. They did not let go of any possible corner from top to bottom. They were extremely professional. In front of such a strict body search, any attempt to hide the spirit jades would be courting death. There was no possibility of getting away with it. However, Lin Yi noticed that these staff members seemed to be very familiar with Meng Jiuguang. When they searched the new disciples, they searched them carefully, but when it came to Meng Jiuguang, they just pretended to go through the motions. In addition, Dai Wuchang was clearly helping Meng Jiuguang to suppress the poor guy. It seemed that this steward's senior brother seemed to be very popular in this place. After the search, they passed through the compartment and officially entered the spiritual jade mine. It was deep and spacious. The distance between their feet and the top of the mine was about 4 or 5 feet. It was not a simple and small mine as they had imagined. It was obviously a huge mine that had been carefully reinforced and designed. Bright fluorite stones of various sizes were inlaid in every corner of the top of the mine. At first glance, it did not look like a mine, but more like a mysterious underground world, which was pleasing to the eye. Chapter 3590. Every mine entrance was guarded by an expert, marked with numbers 1 to 10. Needless to say, these 10 mines led to their respective mining areas. Only after showing the corresponding pass token could one enter. Meng Jiuguang led Meng Tong and Li Jingming into the 7th mine. The other new disciples entered the 8th mine. As for Lin Yi, he entered the 10th mine accompanied by Senior Brother Ku Bai. "Senior Brother Ku, don't you need a special pass token to come in?" Lin Yi turned his head and looked at Senior Brother Ku Bai in surprise. When he came in just now, he clearly saw that Senior Brother Ku Bai only showed the guard his jade token as the welcoming pavilion steward. The same was true for Meng Jiuguang on the other side. "Yes, the identity card of the welcoming pavilion steward is also valid here. However, because I'm from Blue Cloud Pavilion, I can only enter the 7th, 8th, and 9th mine. Of course, the 10th mine is a public mine, so you can come and go as you please." Senior Brother Ku Bai nodded. After a pause, he immediately complained. "Junior Brother Lin, you really shouldn't have signed this contract just now. I've come to the 10th mine before and couldn't dig out any good jade at all. However, there's no other way. I'll take you to the places where I've dug up some spirit jades. Although I can only dig up some useless jades, it's still better than blindly doing useless work like a headless fly." "Thank you, Senior Brother Ku," Lin Yi responded with a smile. Although he was now in the early stage of foundation establishment, and did not have as much time pressure as other new disciples, 3 months was not a short time. If he really could not dig out anything at all, it would be a pure waste of time. However, it was enough to dig out useless jade. The mine was winding and long. According to Senior Brother Ku Bai, the 10th mine was already a very remote location. The two of them walked for more than an hour before reaching their destination. Along the way, although they occasionally saw a few people, they could be counted on one hand. Even when they arrived at the real mining site, there were only 2 or 3 people in such a large mining area, 2 of whom were guards in uniform. The name of the 10th dead mining area was indeed well deserved. Seeing Linny and the other man, the 2 bored guards looked at each other and jokingly said, "Heh, another 2 unlucky bastards." Even the trash from Blue Cloud Pavilion wouldn't be willing to come to a dead mine like this. They must be the unlucky ones who had offended the higher-ups. As the guards here, they were already used to this kind of thing. Ku Bai's face immediately darkened. He was actually treated as an unlucky ghost by the guards. Just look at how Meng Jiaguang was enjoying himself. Wherever he went, there would be acquaintances. On the other hand, Meng Jiaguang was suffering. That was really a real hardship. "I'm Senior Brother Ku Zhongla, the manager of the Blue Cloud Pavilion's welcoming pavilion. I'm here to escort the disciples into the mining area," Senior Brother Ku Bai said. "Happiness from hardship?" The 2 guards were obviously stunned. "I've never heard of it. Are you the steward, Senior Brother? Wasn't Senior Steward Meng Jiaguang bitter? How could there be bitterness and happiness?" I'm Ku Bai. Ku Bai is my nickname, and Ku Zhongla is my original name," Ku Bai explained with a wry smile. "Dizzy. If I had told you earlier, you would have been fine." The guard nodded and waved his hand. He gestured for the bitter guy to enter. After greeting the 2 guards with a nod, he took Linny to the mining site that he was familiar with. But before he could take 2 steps, he heard the 2 guards talking behind him. "So he is a bitter bastard. Now that I've seen him today, he is indeed a bitter bastard. Yeah, but I feel that the one beside him is the one who is suffering. He followed the wrong person. If he followed Meng Jiaguang, how could he be here? Sigh, that can't be helped. Actually, aren't we the same? If he hadn't offended Dai Wuchang, a figure with real power in Spirit Jade Hall, how could he have been sent here?" Linny also heard the previous conversation. It turned out that Ku Bai's name was Ku Zhongla. But obviously, he himself had tacitly agreed to the name of Ku Bai, so that when he officially registered, no one knew him. The 2 walked into the mining area, put down the basket that was specially written with their names at the door, and took out the shovel inside. Ku Bai's senior brother personally demonstrated and guided Linny on some of the tricks of mining. What was worth mentioning was that in order to prevent the heaven and earth spiritual chi from being damaged during mining, the shovels used for mining were made entirely of jade. However, they were similar to other shovels made of iron, hard, sharp, and very practical. Not only could it easily break the soil, but it could even easily penetrate hard stones. Linny even felt that this thing was more than enough to be used as a weapon. After mastering the tricks of Ku Bai's guidance, Linny quickly got used to it. After all, this thing itself was not complicated, and it mainly depended on strength. And with Lin Yi's strength in the early stage of foundation establishment, this kind of strength work was naturally not a problem. Even if he worked non-stop for a whole day, he would not feel tired at all. Although this was the number 10 dead mining area, the jade production rate was extremely low, but Lin Yi now chose this point. After all, with the experience of Ku Bai's senior brother, and his luck was good today. Just a moment later, he dug out the first piece of spirit jade. Wiping the soil on the surface with a cloth, the white jade quickly bloomed with brilliance. The appearance looked exactly the same as the few pieces of spirit jade in his hand, but after carefully feeling the spiritual energy in it, he found that it was very thin, the concentration was less than 1%, it was a typical piece of waste jade. "It's okay, if you save up a lot of this kind of waste jade, you can also exchange it for good jade," Ku Bai's senior brother comforted on the side. Lin Yi nodded, and then he saw one of the 2 guards in the distance come over, carrying a pair of scales with him. After taking out the waste jade that Lin Yi dug out, weighing it, and recording the number, he threw the waste jade back into the basket, turned around, and left. "What is he doing?" Lin Yi wondered. This is the same monitoring process in all mining areas. In order to prevent people from secretly hiding spirit jade, every time someone dug out a spirit jade, the guard will weigh it and record the number. When it is time to finish work, all the spirit jade that you have collected will be weighed again. If the number is too different from the number provided by the guard, especially if it is a lot less, you will be isolated for investigation, Kubai's senior brother explained. Chapter 3591. If it's a good jade full of spiritual energy, it's understandable that the inspection is so strict, but is it the same for waste jade? Lin Yi's heart was moved. The bitter senior nodded. It's the same. Whether it's a good jade or a waste jade, the process is the same. Only before it enters the warehouse, there will be specialized personnel to distinguish the quality, sort out the good jade and waste jade, and record the corresponding quantity as the basis for future payment. This is a bit tricky. According to Lin Yi's original idea, stealing a few pieces of waste jade should be a simple matter, but in this way, even if he only stole a piece of waste jade, it was very likely to be discovered. After all, once the spirit jade was dug out, the guards would come over on the spot to weigh it and record the data. At the end, when the work was handed over, it had to be weighed again. If the number of spirit jades collected every day was not much, even if he only secretly hid a piece, there would be a big discrepancy between the two numbers. Or could he hide the spirit jade in the space of the jade pendant the moment he dug it out, and then pretend that he didn't dig it out? This idea naturally came to Lin Yi, but after quietly looking back to observe the two guards, he quickly gave up the idea. There was no other reason other than the fact that there weren't many people who came here to collect jade, and the two guards were bored to death. They'd look over at Lin Yi from time to time, and there was a huge difference between when the jade was dug up and when the jade wasn't dug up, and the process wasn't long either. Lin Yi might not even have the time to dig up the jade, and the two guards would already be behind him, waiting to weigh the jade. There was no way he could escape their surveillance. But in this way, if he couldn't make a move before the spirit jade was weighed by the guards, then it would be even more impossible after that. For a time, he even felt that he made a mistake coming here. If he couldn't think of a surefire way to steal the hidden jade, then the next 3 months would be a complete waste of time. It would be a waste of practice time. While thinking of various possible methods, he continued to mine. However, Lin Yi's luck was really good today. In just a short time, he dug out another piece of spirit jade. It seems that this junior's luck is not bad, although the weight felt much lighter than ordinary good jade. However, it's still a bit heavier than the first piece. It can be seen that even if it's a waste jade, it's still a good piece of waste jade. The guard who came over to weigh the jade sighed with a smile. Originally, according to the rules of Spirit Jade Hall, guards were not allowed to chat with outsiders under normal circumstances. However, the work in the 10th mining area was really boring. Even if they casually chatted to relieve boredom, their colleagues would only turn a blind eye to it. The weight of good jade will be heavier? Hearing the guard's words, Yi Zichen nodded. An idea suddenly flashed in Lin Yi's mind. He turned his head and asked the bitter senior brother. That's right, junior brother Lin, don't you know that even if they are the same size, a good jade full of spiritual qi will be much heavier than a waste jade with thin spiritual qi? The bitter senior brother nodded. I see. Lin Yi breathed out in relief. If that was the case then. If this was the case, even in the face of the strict supervision process of Spirit Jade Hall, there might be loopholes to exploit. Bitter senior brother, I have a basic understanding of the situation here. You don't have to continue to follow me and waste time here. You'd better go and do your own things. Lin Yi turned his head and said to the bitter senior brother. This? All right. Then I'll go first. The bitter senior brother nodded. He specifically came over today because he was afraid that Lin Yi would suffer a loss, but now things had come to this. It was not a solution to continue to waste time here. It was better to go back and think of ways to see how to help Lin Yi. Watching the bitter senior brother leave, the idea in Lin Yi's mind had gradually taken shape at this moment, and the most crucial point was the weight of the spirit jade. The spirit jade full of spiritual qi was heavy, and the spirit jade with thin spiritual qi was light. This was the key point that Lin Yi was going to use to make a fuss. Although the two guards would look at this side from time to time, they did not always pay attention to the situation here. According to Lin Yi's idea, he could pick up the weighed waste jade from the basket beside him when the guards were not paying attention and put it into his jade pendant space. After charging it, he could quietly put it back. In this way, if there were a few more pieces, the extra weight after charging should be enough to equal a piece of spirit jade. At that time, even if he secretly hid a piece, there would not be much difference in the weight after handing it over to the workers. In this way, he could get away with it. After thinking about it, the only loophole in this idea was that when the quality was finally divided in the reservoir area, there would be a lot of good jade among the spirit jades that Lin Yi handed over. This would not be a problem in other high-quality mining areas, but in this dead mining area number 10, it was a bit conspicuous. But then again, this was not a big problem. No matter how conspicuous it was, people would at most say that Lin Yi was lucky, and absolutely no one would think that Lin Yi had secretly charged the waste jade into good jade and put it back. After all, in the logic of normal people, handing over their own good jade as mined jade was simply crazy. If the good jade was not mined on the spot, but originally had, then what was the point of handing it over? He could just keep it for himself. Why did he have to count it as the result of mining and expect a reward of 100 yuan for one piece? His brain must have been kicked by a donkey. Moreover, entering and exiting the mining area required a body search. Even if Lin Yi wanted to bring the spirit jades in, it was impossible. After the plan was decided, Lin Yi immediately put it into action. After digging continuously for 4 hours without rest, in his basket, other than those that looked like waste jade at a glance, there were already 18 pieces of the appearance of waste spirit jades, in various sizes. This might not be considered much in other high-yield mining areas, but this was the dead mining area number 10. To have such a result was quite good, even the guards who came to weigh it were amazed. Of course, according to the usual behavior of the 10th mining area, although these 18 pieces of spirit jades looked impressive, in fact, they should be 100% waste jade, so there was no need to be envious of them. It seemed that Lin Yi had been mining, but in the process of working, he secretly used the space in the jade pendant to store the 8 pieces of waste spirit jades that looked like spirit jades in the basket. Because the spirit jades were taken out from the middle of the basket, they still looked the same, without much change, and the guards from afar could not see anything strange if they did not look carefully. Chapter 3592. According to the difference between the previous and the subsequent measurements, he found that these 8 fully filled spiritual jades weighed more than 10 pieces of waste jades. This meant that under the premise that the weight was not too different, he could secretly hide 2 pieces of spiritual jades. Although the 2 pieces of spiritual jades were useless, they were truly good jades in Lin Yi's hands. Hiding 2 pieces a day might not seem like much, but if he could continue doing it smoothly, it would definitely be a considerable amount of wealth. Moreover, Lin Yi didn't touch the jade that looked good on the outside. Instead, he only touched the jade that looked like it was useless on the outside. It was the kind that only had a trace of energy in it. If this little bit of energy was used up, the jade would immediately shatter. Perhaps the guards wouldn't deliberately count the quantity of this kind of jade, but they would definitely have an impression of those that looked like good jade. If Lin Yi really touched it, it would be very easy for problems to arise. However, whether he could move or not, he still had to test it out. If they really had a strict requirement for quantity, then Lin Yi could only return the stolen spiritual jades. As for why the weight of the jade increased, the guards probably wouldn't suspect it. After all, no one would be stupid enough to count their own jade. They would only think that they had remembered wrongly. But if it was feasible, think about it. Lin Yi would be working here for 3 months in the future. Even if the ranking competition and the rookie trial were excluded, that would be at least 70 days. If he hid 2 pieces a day, that would be 140. One had to know that the Welcome Pavilion only gave out a piece of spirit jade to the newcomers every month. What kind of concept was 140? This was simply turning the tables and becoming a local tycoon. Even for a senior like Meng Jiaguang, who was a senior steward, he could not do anything about it. He definitely didn't have so many spiritual jades. For consumables like spiritual jades, which could be used for cultivation and trade, it would be considered good if Meng Jiaguang could save 30 to 50 spiritual jades, let alone 140 spiritual jades. Otherwise, he would not have lost 2 spiritual jades for so long. In this way, as long as Lin Yi had enough spiritual jades on hand, not to mention buying medicinal ingredients for alchemy, even if he wanted more precious treasures, it would only take a word from him. After all, this was just like the secular world. The more spiritual jades one had, the stronger one's back would be, and the more confident one would be in doing things. However, all of this beautiful vision was built on the basis that things went smoothly. Although Lin Yi's plan to steal the spiritual jades seemed to be quite comprehensive, if the 2 guards weighing him were really very careful, they would not be able to do it. That was because he had sensed something fishy. Of course, according to Lin Yi's observation of these 2 people, the possibility of this happening was not high. Even if there was a risk of being discovered, it was very small. The 2 of them only took note of the amount of waste jade on the outside of the golden jade. They only used a counter to accumulate the total, and did not record the individual weights. After working for a full 12 hours, it should be dark outside. Suddenly, a faint bell sound came from the distance. One of the guards shouted at the top of his lungs. "All right." The bell rang and the work was over. That was all for today. Pack up and hand over the work with me. Lin Yi looked around and could not help but laugh. The guard's words were simply directed at him. In such a big mining area, there was no one else except for himself and the 2 guards. Getting up and patting off the dust on his body, Lin Yi put away the jade shovel, carried the basket, and followed the 2 guards out of the mining area. "Junior brother, you have a good harvest today. TSK, on your first day here, you can collect more than 42 jin. Although it should be waste jade, it is still very good." One of the guards waved the account book in his hand at Lin Yi. He had been bored to death in this dead mining area for a year. Now that he finally met a new face, he was purely looking for a topic to relieve his boredom. "You have mined a lot of jade that looks good. Even if it is waste jade, this kind of jade that looks good can be exchanged for a good spiritual jade after accumulating 10,000 pieces. Speaking of which, you still have hope. 10,000 pieces. If Lin Yi did not have a golden finger, he would be exhausted to death. Lin Yi's sharp eyes took a glance at the guard's account book. At the top of the page was his name, and below it was a series of numbers that looked like good jade. At the bottom, there was a conspicuous number that was specially circled, 42 jin 3 taels. This was the number that subtracted the weight of the basket. It could be considered as the final accurate record on his side. Sure enough, as Lin Yi had guessed, there was no such thing as the total number of waste jade. There was only the total weight of the jade. For Lin Yi, there were many things that could be manipulated here. It was purely luck. Senior brother, this is my first time here, so I do not know the rules here. Can you tell me what the rules are for handing over the work? Lin Yi saw that the guard was quite amiable, so he tried to open his mouth and ask. To be honest, although Lin Yi did not think that he would give himself away, at this time, he was really facing the last test. His heart was still a little shaky. This was like a student cheating on an exam. Even if the invigilator did not catch them cheating on the spot, after handing in the exam paper, they would still be worried that they did not leave any clues on the paper. For example, copying down the mistakes of others. The guard looked at Lin Yi and thought that it was boring anyway, so he smiled and said, "The handing over process is very simple. You hand over the basket of spirit jade that you dug, and I hand over my account book. There is nothing else for us to do. We just wait on the side and watch. There will be people in the warehouse who will weigh your spirit jade again. As long as the number is not too different from my mark of 42 jin 3 taels, there will be no problem." "Will there be a difference in this?" Lin Yi asked with narrowed eyes. "Of course there will be a difference. The same basket of jade will have a difference if different people weigh it, not to mention that the scale in my hand is so simple. It is completely incomparable to the accuracy of the big scale in their warehouse. However, as long as the difference is within 5 taels, it is considered normal," the guard replied. Lin Yi nodded thoughtfully. Normally, a piece of spirit jade of average size would weigh at least more than 1 jin. If the difference was within 5 taels, it meant that it must be caused by the weighing error, which was enough to rule out the possibility of stealing the spirit jade. Chapter 3593. If the margin of error was 5 taels, then it shouldn't be too big of a problem. Lin Yi heaved a sigh of relief. As a foundation establishment early-stage expert, his sensitivity to weight was far above ordinary people. According to his estimation, the difference in weight between the 8 pieces of spirit jades filled with spiritual energy and the 10 pieces of waste jades with thin spiritual energy was at most 2 to 3 taels. Then what if the difference is more than 5 taels? What will happen? Lin Yi thought for a while and asked again. Then you will be isolated for inspection, and you will have to strip naked and search your body. The guard chuckled, then looked at Lin Yi mischievously and said, Brother, you are inquiring about this. Could it be that you secretly hid the spirit jades? Senior brother, you must be joking. The body search is so strict, even if I want to hide it, I can't hide it. If you don't hide it on your body, but in this mine, what's the difference from not hiding it? Anyway, you can't bring it out. Lin Yi smiled. And the 2 guard senior brothers are here so conscientiously, I also don't have a chance. That's right. Hee brother, what you said is right. The rules of our Spirit Jade Hall are so strict, ordinary people have no chance to steal the spirit jades and bring them out. Especially a newcomer without any foundation like you, don't even think about it. Only those who have a deep network of connections have a glimmer of chance. TSK, this world! The guard sighed with envy and dissatisfaction. Hearing his words, Lin Yi unconsciously thought of a person, Meng Jiaguang. Judging from his previous performance, this guy seemed to be very popular in the Spirit Jade Hall. He should be considered as the guy with a deep network of connections that the guard mentioned. With Meng Jiaguang's temperament as a steward's senior brother, he might take the risk out of desperation. Lin Yi's heart moved, but this thought was just a flash. The urgent matter was to inquire about the various rules of this Spirit Jade Hall first. He managed to get quite a bit of information out of this talkative guards. It might not be all that useful, but he'd at least have an idea of what they'd be facing next. After half an hour, Lin Yi followed the 2 guards out of the 10th mine. To his surprise, Meng Jiaguang and his party were standing at the delivery place at the entrance of the warehouse. Mine 10 was the furthest away, and mine 7 and 8 were a lot nearer. It wasn't strange that they'd come back earlier than Lin Yi, but it didn't make sense that they were still here, waiting for Lin Yi, even though it seemed like they'd already finished their work and waited. But after seeing the gloating expression on everyone's faces, Lin Yi quickly understood the intentions of these guys. Lin Yi, they were waiting here of their own. Yo, our strongest newcomer finally came out. I thought I couldn't dig up the spirit jades, so I wanted to die of shame and anger. In a rage, I wanted to kill myself in the dead mining area. As soon as he saw Lin Yi appear, Meng Tong immediately jumped out and mocked. Meng Tong, how can you say that? Meng Jiaguang pretended to be serious and reprimanded, and then said, Our strongest newcomer was deeply taught by junior brother Bitter. Even if he really wanted to die of shame and anger, he would at most hide inside like a turtle. How could he possibly kill himself? Really don't know how to talk. Can't you see that junior brother Bitter is still alive and well? What did their faction like to be? That little picture book that someone brought from the secular world. That's right. It's called Ninja Turtle. Oh right, Ninja Turtle. It's still ninth cousin who has a good eye for people. But this pretentious newcomer is quite thick-skinned. Maybe when he weighs it, he will know what it means to want to die of shame and anger. Meng Tong echoed with a strange smile. The people on the side could not help but laugh. After a tiring day, they could not wait to find a sense of superiority from Lin Yi, who had always been in the limelight. It seems that you don't have an easy time, brother. The guard looked at the scene and shook his head with a smile. He led Lin Yi to the place where the work was handed over. While handing over the account book in his hand to the staff in charge of weighing, he gestured to Lin Yi to pour the spirit jades in the basket onto the platform of a giant scale. Guess how many kilograms of spirit jades our pretentious newcomer has collected today? I'll say 5 kilograms. Meng Tong led the crowd to jeer. The others were immediately amused. They had already weighed it before. Even the smallest among them was at least 20 kilograms. And people like Meng Tong and Li Jingming, who were assigned to mine number 7, were both above 15 kilograms. This number was considered acceptable for a newcomer who was mining for the first day. Brother Tong, that's not right. No matter what, we are fellow disciples. I feel that there should be at least 2 kilograms. Li Jingming echoed from the side. I bet 5 kilograms. I bet 4.5 kilograms. While the crowd was jeering, Lin Yi was too lazy to pay attention to them. When he took the basket from his back and poured 30 to 40 pieces of spirit jades on the platform, the group of people instantly fell silent. 42 kilograms and 5 taels. The staff noted down the number. After comparing it with the number on the account book, there was only a difference of 2 taels. He nodded and gestured to Lin Yi to put the spirit jades back into the basket and let him go. No problem. Lin Yi immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Before this, his heart was hanging in suspense. He did not expect to pass so easily. This made him feel relieved but also a little surprised. But thinking about it carefully, the mining area was so big, and there were so many people mining. Using this kind of weight to verify was already rare and harsh. If they had to check in more detail, then the workload would absolutely make everyone in Spirit Jade Hall collapse. What's more, there was a strict body search when entering and exiting the mine. To a large extent, it had put an end to people's attempts to steal the spirit jades. This was just an auxiliary monitoring process. Lin Yi was relieved, but the others present, especially Meng Tong's group, were embarrassed. Looking at the bright red number on the giant scale, they were speechless for a long time. 42 kilograms and 5 taels. What kind of concept was this? This was simply killing all of them. Even Meng Tong, who had received guidance from Meng Jieguang, was only 35 kilograms in the end. This must be cheating. How can a dead mine dig out so many spirit jades? Meng Tong could not help but cry out. Cheating? How could this thing cheat? Could it be that they had racked their brains to secretly bring in their own spirit jades, and then sneak in and pretend to dig them out themselves to hand over? There must be something wrong with their brains. Chapter 3594. It seems that Ku Bai is really attentive to this rare little brother of yours. Did he help you dig a lot of these spiritual jades? Although Meng Jieguang's face was also a little ugly, he was not as hysterical as Meng Tong. He raised his eyebrows and deduced self-righteously. The others suddenly realized that according to Ku Bai's honest character, it was very possible that he helped Lin Yi dig the spiritual jades in order to make up for it. Since there was a veteran like Ku Bai to help, Lin Yi's 42 caddies and 5 taels was not so exaggerated. The originally disappointed and embarrassed people suddenly felt balanced in their hearts. There were 2 people and they were 1 person. Wasn't it normal for them to have more spiritual jades than them? Lin Yi smiled noncommittally. Although his results were indeed due to Ku Bai's credit, after all, it was Ku Bai who helped him find the mining site and taught him many practical tricks. It was undeniable that these 42 caddies and 5 taels were also the result of Lin Yi's own labor. This was beyond doubt. It didn't matter if it was his senior brother's teaching, or if it was his luck today, the spirit jades were all dug out by himself. There wasn't any cheating involved. If it was really cheating, his results were more than this. After all, he still secretly hid 2 pieces. However, although this was the case, since everyone insisted on thinking so, then Lin Yi was too lazy to talk to them. They could think whatever they wanted about this kind of insignificant things. Since these people wanted to find a psychological balance for themselves, Lin Yi could not stop them, so he simply ignored them. Looking at Lin Yi's calm appearance, everyone suddenly felt unhappy in their hearts. They obviously formed a group to wait here to see Lin Yi make a fool of himself. The result was good. Instead, they seemed to have become clowns, and Lin Yi saw them as a joke. In fact, the weight is not the key. If you dig out 20 caddies of spiritual jades in a good mining area, there may be 10 good jades full of spiritual qi. Perhaps there are 10 pieces of good jade full of spiritual energy inside, but in some well-known dead mining area, not to mention 40 caddies, even if you dig out 400 caddies of spiritual jade, there may not be a single piece of good jade. Meng Jiuguang looked at Lin Yi, a cold smile on his face. At the end of the day, you'll only get paid if you dig up good jades. If they're all trash jades with only a little bit of qi in them, what's the point even if you empty the entire mine? Hee hee. Right. Senior apprentice brother Meng is right. When we dig for jade here, we should take a good look before we start. We should try our best to dig out those jade that seem to be of good quality. If we just use brute force to dig and don't pursue quality, then let alone 42 gene, with our current strength, it wouldn't be difficult for us to dig 400 gene in a day. Meng Tong immediately chimed in. 400 gene was an exaggeration. However, if one didn't focus on quality and blindly dug, it was still possible to dig up 100 gene. It was just that in those better mining areas. The ones that fell were obviously useless jades. They didn't even put them in the baskets. They just put them in the trash baskets and only put the jade that looked good in their baskets. On the other hand, on Lin Yi's side, he was the only one, so he put all the good and bad jades together. After listening to Meng Jiuguang and Meng Tong's words, everyone immediately regained their confidence. For a moment, they looked at Lin Yi with disdain and sarcasm. That's right. They came here to mine for the reward of spiritual jades. Even if Lin Yi dug out a few hundred caddies of jade and beat everyone here, so what? He was assigned to the 10th mining area. It was destined that he wouldn't be able to pick good jade that was full of spiritual qi. And without good jade, there would be no reward. This was common sense. Although according to the rules of Spirit Jade Hall, even if there was a lot of useless jade, it could be exchanged for good jade to receive the reward. However, this ratio was enough to make everyone give up hope. Even if it was a good quality useless jade, it would need at least 100 pieces to be equal to the spiritual qi of a good jade. As for the worse ones, that was the kind that only covered half of the outer layer of the spiritual jade and inside was the useless jade core. The ratio was 1,000 to 1. To put it simply, if they wanted to rely on this to earn spiritual jades, they might as well prepare to retire here early. At least in a short period of time, there was absolutely no hope. Therefore, if one wanted to exchange this kind of worthless jade with a price of 1,000 to 1, it would cost 100,000 yuan to exchange for a piece of spiritual jade. Therefore, these people simply gave up. According to the old rules, it would be thrown into the public waste basket. However, there was also a process of accumulation. These useless jades could be exchanged for rewards after a long time. However, it was filled by some people. These two people were Dai Wuchang and Meng Jiuguang. However, this kind of thing also happened in the mining area of the other two pavilions. It was a tradition to show filial respect to the supervisor here and the supervisor of the welcoming pavilion. It was not a robbery, so others wouldn't say anything if they knew. Lin Yi shook his head speechlessly as he looked at their expressions. Just how low did these people's self-esteem go? Why did they have to use him as a source of comfort? The Blue Cloud Pavilion was so weak, and it was passed down from generation to generation. It was not without reason. At this time, Lin Yi wanted to see what kind of expression this group of people would have when the quality inspection results came out. It must be very interesting. Under everyone's gaze, Lin Yi put the spiritual jades on the weighing platform back into his basket and sent them to the quality inspection office next to him. There were 5 specially trained quality inspection personnel responsible for distinguishing the quality of the spiritual jades, recording everyone's results for the day, and categorizing the spiritual jades and sending them to the warehouse. Compared to weighing, the work of quality inspection was obviously heavier. Even if there were 5 people working at the same time, there was still a row of baskets in front of Lin Yi. Looking at the names on the baskets, it happened to be Meng Tong and the other newcomers of the Blue Cloud Pavilion. At this time, one of the quality inspection personnel reported, "Li Jingming, 6 pieces of good jade, 22 pieces of useless jade." For a moment, all the newcomers looked at Li Jingming with envy. For newcomers who were unfamiliar with the tricks of mining on their first day, it was quite good to be able to find more than 5 pieces of good jade in a day. Previously, several other newcomers had already finished quality inspection, and the best one only had 4 pieces of good jade. Of course, these people were assigned to Mining Area 8, which was a grade lower than Li Jingming's Mining Area 7, so their results were not as good as Li Jingming's. This was very normal. And then, another quality inspection personnel reported, "Meng Tong, 7 pieces of good jade, 23 pieces of useless jade." Chapter 3595. Hee, don't be envious of the 2 of them. Look at the result of our pretentious newcomer later. You will definitely feel better. Meng Jiaguang sneered as he guided them. In fact, from his point of view, there was no need to even think about it. The 10th mining area was known to be a dead mining area with no good jade. Lin Yi's final result would definitely be a pile of useless jade. There would not be a single piece of good jade. And this was the effect that Meng Jiaguang wanted. Newcomers like Meng Tong and Li Jingming who listened to him could stay in a good mining area and collect at least 6 or 7 pieces of good jade a day. On the other hand, a disobedient troublemaker like Lin Yi would be assigned to the 10th dead mining area. He would be busy all day but could not even find a piece of good jade. Comparing the 2, the newcomers present naturally knew what they should do. Those who obey me will prosper, those who oppose me will perish. This was the minimum requirement that Meng Jiaguang had for himself. If he could not even achieve this among the useless newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion, then he would be letting down his authority as the big senior brother. In fact, if it was not for the troublemaker Lin Yi who had repeatedly ruined his plans, he would have achieved this step long ago based on previous years' experience. But now, not only had he not achieved this step, he even had a very bad premonition. The source of this premonition was this morning's scene. For the sake of Lin Yi, Meng Jiaguang had endured many years of suffering. Now Meng Jiaguang actually dared to contradict him in public. For Meng Jiaguang, who was used to having his own words, this was not a good sign. The reason why Meng Jiaguang could enjoy his position as the big senior brother was because of his wide network. Although his background might not be very strong, he could rely on his scheming and meticulous research to make contact with people from all walks of life. It could be said that he had built a good network of relationships. But in addition to this, another more important reason was because of bitter joy. According to the rules of the welcoming pavilion, the newcomers of the 3 pavilions were managed by their respective senior brothers. In other words, under normal circumstances, the authority was divided equally between the 2 senior brothers. However, at the Blue Cloud Pavilion, due to the existence of senior brother Bitter, who could be said to be a weirdo, the Blue Cloud Pavilion's disciples were all shocked. That was why Meng Jiaguang was able to monopolize the power without any suspense. In fact, if it were someone else who was slightly more motivated, it would not be easy for him to achieve this. After all, even if he was more experienced, their statuses were equal. Once they started competing, it would be very troublesome. Initially, Meng Jiaguang was very satisfied with the current situation. However, today, they actually dared to defy his will in public and even tried to rearrange the mining area for Lin Yi. This was simply challenging his authority. Although the confrontation had ended in a bitter defeat, it was not a good sign. Especially with Lin Yi, this restless fellow, egging him on from behind, he might cause even more trouble in the future. Although in Meng Jiaguang's eyes, the bitter fellow was not considered a worthy opponent, it was still a troublesome matter. It was better to nip it in the bud as soon as possible. And to achieve this, The most realistic thing was to take advantage of the bitter fellow to make trouble again and subdue all the other newcomers as soon as possible. When that time came, he would only have a few useless soldiers like Lin Yi. No matter how much the bitter fellow planned, he would not be able to shake Meng Jiuguang's position as the senior brother. Meng Jiuguang led the group of newcomers. He looked at Lin Yi with a sneer. When he dug painstakingly for a whole day, but in the end, there was not a single piece of good jade, how would he feel? He would definitely be depressed to the point of wanting to kill himself. Looking at his basket being dragged in by the quality inspection personnel, Lin Yi's expression was normal. He even had a faint smile on his face. But in the eyes of the crowd, this fellow was obviously trying to maintain his dignity. The pretentious newcomer really knows how to act. At this time, he can actually maintain his dignity without batting an eyelid. It really makes people sigh in admiration. Meng Tong curled his lips and sneered. What he disliked the most was Lin Yi's calm and collected manner. He was a living pretentious criminal. Of course, if it was him who had the chance to be in the limelight, he would definitely be willing to learn. Presumably, he would be very willing to learn. After all, he looked unfathomable and awesome. Who wouldn't like to act cool? He dares to offend senior brother Meng. He really doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Let's see how he cries later. Under Meng Jiuguang's deliberate guidance, some of the newcomers had already thought it through and began to draw closer to Meng Jiuguang. If it was before, these ordinary newcomers without any backing would definitely not offend Lin Yi in public even if they disliked him. After all, from the performance on the first day when he defeated Meng Tong in one move, it could be seen that Lin Yi was definitely a tough guy. The consequences of offending him were obviously not good. But now, on one side was Meng Tong and Li Jingming's 6 or 7 pieces of spiritual jades. On the other side was Lin Yi's destined 0. With such a clear distinction in front of them, if they still did not know how to choose, they would really be stupid. At this time, stepping on Lin Yi in front of Meng Jiuguang was a proof of allegiance. If they did not step on him, it would be a waste. If they did not step on him now, it would be too late. Since everyone was a heaven stage expert, naturally, they were not stupid. After someone was the first to understand, the others quickly reacted. They were afraid that they would be labeled as abnormal by Meng Jiuguang. They could not wait to start making sarcastic remarks about Lin Yi. The words that came out of their mouths were more and more unpleasant to hear. Although this group of newcomers did not have any talent, they were not too stupid. Meng Jiuguang immediately laughed proudly. This was the effect that he wanted. Bitter. You, this kind of trash that only appears once in 10,000 years wants to fight with me. You should first take a piss and look at your unlucky face. However, before he finished laughing, the next sentence that came from the quality inspection department made everyone suddenly stunned. Each of them were like ducks that had their necks pinched. Their faces turned red, but they could not say a word. Lin Yi 8 good jades, 7 useless jades. 20 useless jades. The so-called useless jades were the kind of jades that looked like useless jades. Other newcomers would not want this kind of jades. Of course, it was considered as filial piety to their senior. 100,000 to exchange for the reward? How long would that take? Instead of being useless in their own hands, it was better to give it to Meng Jiuguang. However, even if they did not mention the useless jades, although Lin Yi's useless jades were far less than Meng Tong and Li Jingming, the problem was that he actually had 8 good jades. How could he have 8? Wasn't he a dead mining area where not even one good jade could be found? If any newcomer could get 8 good jades on the first day, how could it be called a dead mining area? The quality could be ranked above the 7th mining area. It was almost the same as the 5th and 6th mining areas. Chapter 3596. After being stunned for a moment, Meng Jiuguang's face was filled with disbelief. He couldn't help but raise his head and ask the person in charge of the Quality Inspection Office. Senior Tong, did you just report the wrong name? This Lin Yi is from the 10th dead mine. How could he possibly have 8 good jades? This Senior Tong was an old man and a disciple of the mysterious pavilion. As the person in charge of the quality inspection office, although he usually didn't think much of the people from the Blue Cloud Pavilion, he had a good impression of Meng Jiaguang after interacting with him a few times. From the 10th Dead Mine? Senior Tong couldn't help but frown in astonishment. How could there be 8 good jades in the 10th Dead Mine? Could it be that he had reported the wrong name? However, when he turned around and carefully checked, he discovered that Lin Yi's name was indeed written on the basket, and the 8 good jades were indeed taken out from the basket. He immediately shook his head in disbelief and said, "These 8 good jades are indeed Lin Yi's. There's no mistake." Senior Tong, are you sure those 8 are good jades? Could it be that you've made a mistake? Meng Jiaguang didn't give up and continued to ask. Meng Tong and the others beside him also had a determined expression of disbelief. Previously, when they were defeated by Lin Yi in one move, it could be said that it was a moment of carelessness. But now, they couldn't even beat him in mining. Moreover, he was the unlucky bastard who was assigned to the 10th Dead Mine. If this were to spread out, it would be too shameful. Made a mistake? Could it be that Junior Ming's ability to identify spiritual jades is even more accurate than this old man's? Why don't you come in and try? Senior Tong's face immediately darkened. The good impression that Meng Jiaguang had deliberately created previously was instantly destroyed because of this one sentence. I don't dare. I'm not good with words. Senior Tong, please don't take it to heart. Meng Jiaguang hurriedly apologized. He wanted to give himself a slap. Telling Senior Brother Tong, the person in charge of the Quality Inspection Department, that he had made a mistake, and in front of so many people, this was no different from digging up someone's ancestral grave. His brain must have gone haywire. Even if it's the 10th Dead Mining area, as long as you're lucky enough, you can still dig up good jade. Senior Brother Tong coldly glanced at him, and finally concluded. Lin Yi 8 pieces of good jade. There is no doubt about it. F***ck me. What kind of world was this? An unlucky bastard from the 10th Dead Mining area was actually able to dig up 8 pieces of good jade. How was he going to let them live? The group of rookies wanted to cry as they looked at the calm Lin Yi. They then turned to look at the managing senior brother, Meng Jiaguang. Although they did not dare to show it on their faces, they were already cursing in their hearts. This was completely different from the script they had agreed on. Originally, they thought that relying on Meng Jiaguang, the managing senior brother, was an extremely wise choice. But now, Meng Tong and Li Jingming, who had received special care from Meng Jiaguang, only managed to dig up 6 or 7 pieces of good jade. As for Lin Yi, the unlucky bastard who had clearly been pranked, he was able to dig up 8 pieces of good jade. Although they did not believe that the 10th Dead Mining area would have such an exaggerated jade production rate, they could at least infer one thing. For Lin Yi to be able to dig up so much good jade, Senior Brother Kubai definitely played a huge role. It was very likely that Senior Brother Kubai had helped him choose the mining spot, which was why he had such a high jade production rate. In that case, the choice to side with Senior Brother Kubai was not a wise choice. Ignoring everything else, at least in terms of jade mining, following Senior Brother Kubai was more reliable than Meng Jiaguang. After all, there was Lin Yi as an example in front of him, and Senior Brother Kubai did not have many subordinates. If he were to side with him, he would definitely receive the same special care as Lin Yi. Even if he could not dig up 8 pieces a day, he could at least hope for 6 or 7 pieces. On the other hand, on the side of Meng Jiaguang, who had always been strong, the people who sided with him were definitely the majority. It did not matter if there was one more or one less. Even if they sided with him, they might not receive much special care. In the end, they would definitely be much worse than Meng Tong and Li Jingning. Perhaps they would only be able to dig up 4 or 5 pieces a day, which was no different from their current situation. For a moment, the newcomers, who had clearly sided with Meng Jiaguang, started to waver in front of Lin Yi, who was a living example. At least they did not speak ill of Lin Yi as unscrupulously as before. This bunch of useless fence-sitters. Meng Jiaguan quickly noticed this point, and could not help but turn livid with anger. He could not wait to hang up this bunch of bastards and beat them up. Compared to Lin Yi, who was a clear-cut enemy, it was this bunch of fence-sitters who were more hateful. But because there was a potential opponent like Ku Bai Bai, Meng Jiaguan could only endure it no matter how angry he was. Otherwise, if he really blew up and pushed this bunch of fence-sitters to Ku Bai Bai, then his good days as the senior brother would come to an end. Unable to open his mouth to scold this bunch of fence-sitters, Meng Jiaguan could only make fun of Lin Yi in the end. He snorted coldly and said, "Humph, it's just a moment of dog shit luck, what's there to be proud of? I dare to bet that our pretentious newcomer can dig up at most 2 pieces of good jade tomorrow." Dog shit luck won't always be there. If he could dig up 7 or 8 pieces of good jade every day, why would it be called the 10th dead mining area? Spirit Jade Hall would have redistributed it long ago. 9th cousin brother is right. What's the saying again? Oh right, a villain intoxicated by success. I want to see how long this pretentious newcomer can be successful. I already can't wait to see this guy's crying face tomorrow. Ha! Meng Tong chimed in by the side. Seeing that everyone was looking at him with complicated expressions, Lin Yi, who was originally too lazy to speak, suddenly smiled. Oh, if you say dog shit luck, then dog shit luck. You're really right. I'm a rogue cultivator. If I don't have dog shit luck, how did I get to Heaven's Stage Island? Maybe I'll continue to be dog shit luck tomorrow, dog shit luck every day. Haha. Pretend. Continue to pretend. Let's see if you can still pretend at this time tomorrow. Let's all wait and see if he's dog shit luck every day. Meng Jiaguan, Meng Tong and the rest sneered as they rolled their eyes. Obviously, they did not take Lin Yi's words seriously. They had already determined in their hearts that Lin Yi being able to dig up 8 pieces of good jade today was absolutely a once-in-a-thousand-years wait. After all, there wasn't anyone mining in the dead mining area all year round. It wasn't impossible for a few pieces of good jade to occasionally pop out. But it could only happen once and not again. How could there be such a thing as dog shit luck all the time? This country bumpkin who came up from the secular world wasn't a child of destiny. Once tomorrow came, he would inevitably reveal his true colors. Chapter 3597. Since this mining area was unanimously evaluated as the worst mining area by the big figures of the 3 pavilions, how could it be possible to continuously produce good jades? Wasn't everyone making a mistake? It was completely impossible. After watching the excitement, everyone dispersed with their own thoughts, and Lin Yi simply returned to his cave residence. Although he was tricked by Meng Jiaguan in the morning during the division of the mining area, but overall, the day's events were relatively smooth. In any case, he got 2 pieces of spiritual jades, which was still very much in line with his expectations, and it turned out that the method of stealing spiritual jades that he found out was very reliable, and he could do it for a long time in the future. Now that he had 5 pieces of spiritual jades on hand, according to this situation, he could go to the marketplace to buy the 5 medicinal materials in 2 days, and then wait for the trial to try to get the heart-devouring exquisite grass, and then he could prepare to refine the heavenly law gold pill, and there was hope for the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment. The night was silent. Early the next morning, Lin Yi set off for Jade's Spirit Hall again, and the other newcomers did the same. They had to work for at least 12 hours a day. This was the rule of Jade's Spirit Hall. Perhaps it was too harsh for ordinary people with limited physical strength, but for these experts who were at least in the late stage of Heaven Realm, even if they did this all year round, there was no pressure at all. However, what Lin Yi didn't know was that although he felt that everything was going well and he was quite satisfied with the situation, there was someone outside who was running around for him, trying to help him get justice. Needless to say, this person was naturally Senior Brother Bitter. As for Lin Yi's disciple, Bitter Senior couldn't help him out most of the time. It was rare for him to be very attentive. This confirmed Lin Yi's impression of him from the very beginning. Although Ku Bai didn't have much power, he was still a man of his caliber. Although senior brother Bitter didn't have much ability, his character was also a mess. But his character was good, and compared to many others, he was much more reliable. However, even if he ran around for Lin Yi, his senior apprentice brother's qualifications were not as deep as Meng Jiuguang's. Secondly, he did not have such a huge network like Meng Jiuguang. There were not many people in Spirit Jade Hall who knew him, not to mention being able to talk to him. On the other hand, the other stewards of the Welcoming Pavilion were only responsible for the affairs of the other two pavilions. As for the trivial matters of the Blue Cloud Pavilion, they simply wouldn't care, and couldn't be bothered to care. As for the few people with higher statuses, the Great Pavilion Master, Hu Yufeng, had always been biased towards Meng Jiuguang due to Meng Jiuguang's deliberate flattery. Although the Vice Pavilion Master, Feng Song, competed with Hu Yunfeng in the open and in the dark, his backer was the mysterious pavilion, so he simply didn't care about a nobody like Ku Bai. Not to mention speaking for him. After thinking it over, senior brother Bitter could only set his target on the last person, the Vice Pavilion Master of the same rank as Feng Song in name, but in fact, it was the third Pavilion Master, Lu Bianren, who was ignored by everyone. Speaking of this third Pavilion Master, Lu Bianren, whether it was the way he handled things or the current awkward situation, was a bit similar to senior brother Bitter himself. Although in name, he was the high and mighty Vice Pavilion Master. In theory, he should be one of the three giants of the Welcoming Pavilion, but in fact, due to the joint suppression of Hu Yufeng and Feng Song, plus his Blue Cloud Pavilion's weak backer, Lu Bianren, the third Pavilion Master, to a large extent, was not even as powerful as the stewards of the three pavilions. As for prestige, there was no need to say anything. He didn't even have a chance to show his face at the welcoming ceremony, and many new disciples didn't even know what his name was. At most, they only knew that there was such an invisible third Pavilion Master, so it was obvious how weak his influence was. Of course, no matter how weak Lu Bianren, the third Pavilion Master, was, after all, a Vice Pavilion Master. His status was still higher than the stewards, and the key was that he came from the Blue Cloud Pavilion. If he was allowed to speak, no matter how arrogant and despotic Meng Jiuguang was, he had to give him some face. Otherwise, if Lu Bianren became angry and removed him from his position, there was nothing he could do about it. Although he could still find a backer to help him get a position when he returned to the Blue Cloud Pavilion, he would lose all his face. Because of their similar temperaments, among all the high-level figures in the Welcoming Pavilion, Lu Bianren was the only one who treated senior brother Bitter differently, and the only one who could get senior brother Bitter to talk to. Although the Bitter senior brother knew that with the third Pavilion Lord's current awkward situation, it was impossible for him to make any big moves. However, if it was just a few words on behalf of the new disciple in the Clear Cloud Pavilion, it shouldn't be a problem. Lu Bianren was not in his number 3 abode. Senior brother Bitter went to several places before he finally found out where he was. As the dignified third Pavilion Master of the Welcoming Pavilion, he was usually not in the Welcoming Pavilion. Instead, he was sent to the back cliff, which was 30 miles away from the Welcoming Pavilion Master's building. The so-called back cliff was also known as the Reflection Cliff in the Welcoming Pavilion. Generally speaking, only the disciples of the Welcoming Pavilion who had made mistakes would be sent here to reflect on their mistakes. Due to its remote location, the spiritual energy was thin, and the lack of cultivation resources, even the newcomers would not be willing to come here. Of course, Lu Bianren was not sent here because he had made a mistake. In fact, if he, the third Pavilion Master, had really made a mistake, even the great Pavilion Master, Hu Yufeng, had no right to punish him. He had to be handed over to the people of the Law Enforcement Hall. The reason why he was here now was that the great Pavilion Master, Hu Yunfeng, and the Deputy Pavilion Master, Feng Song, had jointly proposed to let him take charge of the Reflection Cliff to show that the Welcoming Pavilion attached great importance to the new disciples' discipline. Although it was said that no one would come to the Repent Cliff all year round, the two of them had made it perfectly justifiable. With Lu Bianren's weak position as the third Pavilion Master, there was no way he could resist. In the end, he could only agree. Now, he was stationed here permanently. Nominally, he was in charge of the Repent Cliff, but in fact, he had been banished by Hu Yufeng and Feng Song. Originally, as the third pavilion master, no matter how weak his voice was in the Welcome Pavilion, he still had some power. But now, let alone power, it was difficult for him to even know what was happening in the Welcome Pavilion. He was completely a figurehead. If it were anyone else in Lu Bianren's position, they would probably fly into a rage. But Lu Bianren did not show any sign of dissatisfaction. Instead, he brought over all the ancient cultivation books and scriptures that he had collected in the past. From morning to night, he read the ancient books and meditated on the way of heaven. He was very happy to live in poverty and adapt to the circumstances. Chapter 3598. Pavilion Master Lu, you really made it hard for me to find you, Kubai said as he panted. It wasn't because of the 30 miles of running, but because he was so dizzy looking for Lu Bianren. Even an early-phase foundation establishment practitioner like him was a little confused. Normal disciples wouldn't even know where Lu Bianren was, and the two pavilion masters who did know wouldn't be willing to see a manager of Blue Cloud Pavilion. Kubai earned a lot of money, and in the end, he had no choice but to try and find the other two pavilion masters, and only then did he find out where Lu Bianren was. What's wrong? Did you need something from me, Kubai? Didn't I tell you to just call me Lu Shixiang? Pavilion Master? That's not up to me anymore. Come, have a glass of water, sit down and talk. Although Lu Bianren was a little surprised, he still calmly poured a glass of water for Ku Qian and specially brought out a chair. After drinking the water, Kubai said impatiently, Lu Shixiang, do you know if there are new people coming from the mortal world this year? I know. It's a pity that I moved here before the day of the welcoming ceremony. Without Pavilion Master Hu's permission, I can't leave easily. Otherwise, I would really like to meet these new people and find out what the secular world has become. Lu Bianren sighed regretfully. He was born on Sky Class Island, but ever since Zhang Liju, the legend of the mortal world, appeared on the North Island, he'd always been interested in the mortal world. It was a pity that there hadn't been any new people coming in for a long time, and there was no news about them. They were slowly becoming a legend. However, Zhang Liju's time in the North Island was too short. At that time, Qingyan Pavilion became a legend because of this outsider Zhang Liju. But now, a few hundred years had passed, and Blue Cloud Pavilion had long fallen. Don't worry, Lu Shixiang, you'll get a chance to meet them soon. Seeing that Lu Bianren was interested in the newcomers from the secular world, the bitter senior brother immediately heaved a sigh of relief. In this case, he probably wouldn't refuse Lu Bianren's help in the future. Thus, he said, Our Blue Cloud Pavilion has also been assigned 2 newcomers from the secular world. Moreover, their strength and character are quite good. They would definitely get along well with you, senior brother Lu. It's just that because they came from the secular world, they were jointly suppressed by senior brother Meng and the other local newcomers. They're having a hard time now. You're being ganged up on? Was it because they were newcomers from the secular world? This is preposterous. Lu Bianren's expression immediately changed. Although he was happy to live in poverty and his personality was quite similar to that of his bitter senior brother, he had his own principles on certain matters. Our Blue Cloud Pavilion has been weak for a long time. We can't compete with the other 2 pavilions in terms of newcomers, and what we need the most right now is fresh blood from the secular world. If we could get a legendary person like Zhang Liju, then we might be able to make a comeback. Meng Jiuguang is the head disciple in charge, yet he's still trying to suppress the newcomers from the secular world. How stupid and short-sighted. The bitter senior brother had known this third pavilion master for so long. Even in the worst of situations, he was always calm and collected. He had never seen him this angry before. He said carefully, Don't be too worried, senior brother Lu. Although they're being suppressed, the 2 newcomers from the secular world aren't easy to deal with either. Especially one of the juniors called Lin Yi, because of the distribution of the cave dwelling. He defeated senior brother Meng's cousin with 1 move on the first day, and even senior brother Meng lost to him. Oh? There's such a thing? Come, tell me in detail. Lu Bianren's eyes lit up, and he immediately became interested. The bitter senior brother wanted him to stand up for Lin Yi, but he wasn't in a rush right now. He sat down and told Lu Bianren everything that had happened these past few days, including how Lin Yi was sent to the 10th dead mine. He also told him the purpose of this trip. So this junior brother Lin is quite an interesting person, but he's a newcomer after all, and being bullied by Meng Jiuguang like this is going to be disadvantageous for him. If he really wasted 3 months in the 10th dead mine, then it's the same as increasing the difficulty of him reaching the level of foundation within a year. Lu Bianren analyzed with interest. After the bitter senior brother's explanation, he was getting more and more interested in this tough newcomer Lin Yi. Junior brother Lin doesn't know how dangerous it is, and being stubborn is exactly what senior brother Meng wants. So after thinking about it, I can only ask senior brother Lu for help. The bitter senior brother didn't know that Lin Yi had picked 8 pieces of good jade yesterday. In his opinion, every day that Lin Yi stayed in the 10th mine was a waste of time. It was better to ask the 3rd pavilion master to save him as soon as possible. Well, I'm in charge of the Repent Cliff now. Without pavilion master Hu Yimfeng's permission, I can't go out at will, Lu Bianren said in a low voice. He wasn't trying to evade, but was telling the truth. Otherwise he wouldn't have had no chance to show up at the welcoming ceremony that day. The bitter senior brother's heart sank when he heard this. The 3rd pavilion master was the only help he could find. If even the 3rd pavilion master couldn't show up, then there was really no way he could help Lin Yi. Unexpectedly, Lu Bianren's tone changed. But this matter concerns a newcomer in the secular world, and the entire plan of our Blue Cloud Pavilion. Even if I have to risk being scolded by Pavilion Master Hu, I still have to show up. That's great. I thank Senior Brother Lu on behalf of Junior Brother Lin. Then shall we go find Senior Brother Meng? The bitter Senior Brother was overjoyed. Although Lu Bianren didn't have any power or prestige, he was still the 3rd Pavilion Master of Blue Cloud Pavilion. If he was willing to show up, Meng Jiuguang wouldn't dare to disobey him. Lu Bianren shook his head and said, "No, let's go directly to the Jade Spirit Hall." He knew what the bitter senior brother was thinking. He wanted him to put pressure on Meng Jiuguang from top to bottom, so that Meng Jiuguang would no longer target Lin Yi. This was a way to end all troubles. But he knew Meng Jiuguang. This was a very ambitious and realistic person. Putting pressure on others might be effective, but it would be useless against Meng Jiuguang. Meng Jiuguang might agree on the surface, but he would certainly agree on the surface but oppose it in secret. He might even target Lin Yi behind his back, and it would have the opposite effect. In contrast, going directly to the Jade Spirit Hall and using some of the resources he had accumulated in the past could save Lin Yi from the 10th mining area faster. Chapter 3599. The two immediately left the back cliff and went straight to Spirit Jade Hall. However, after arriving at Spirit Jade Hall, the two did not go to the number 10 mining area to find Lin Yi. Instead, they found the person in charge of the contract at the entrance, Dai Wucheng. "Yo, isn't this Pavilion Master Lu? Long time no see." When Dai Wucheng saw Lu Bianren, he immediately stood up and greeted him with a smile. As for the bitter senior brother behind him, he was directly ignored by him. Although Lu Bianren's situation in the Welcome Pavilion was awkward, he was also a deputy pavilion master level figure. In Spirit Jade Hall, he was a real high-level person. It was not comparable to a small steward like Dai Wucheng. What's more, when he was in Blue Cloud Pavilion, Lu Bianren also took care of him, so the relationship between the two was not bad. Looking at junior brother Dai's expression, it can be seen that you are proud of your success. Lu Bianren responded with a smile. This Dai Wucheng was responsible for the contract. If they wanted to change the mining area for Lin Yi, finding a breakthrough from him was the best choice. After all, Spirit Jade Hall had its own rules. Under normal circumstances, once the contract was signed, it could not be easily changed. Senior brother Lu is a rare guest. Are you going to the mining area to inspect the newcomer of your welcome pavilion? Dai Wucheng asked with a smile. At Lu Bianren's level, no matter how unhappy he was, he would not go to the mines to mine. He basically came here to inspect the newcomer. To be honest, junior brother Dai, I came here this time to look for you. I have something to ask of you. Lu Bianren went straight to the point. Because of a little misunderstanding, our Blue Cloud Pavilion has a newcomer junior brother assigned to the number 10 mining area. As the old people of Blue Cloud Pavilion, we can't let him waste his good time. The newcomer senior brother Lu mentioned, is it Lin Yi? Dai Wucheng's face suddenly changed. Yes, it's Lin Yi. I wonder if junior brother Dai can help with this. Lu Bianren nodded. This? Dai Wucheng couldn't help but be a little embarrassed. To him, Lin Yi was just an insignificant person. Since Lu Bianren had spoken up for Lin Yi in front of him, it was only a matter of lifting a finger to give him face. There was no need to offend him over such a small matter. However, this Lin Yi was a troublemaker that Meng Jiuguang had specifically warned. On one side was Lu Bianren, and on the other side was Meng Jiuguang. This put Dai Wucheng in a dilemma. It must be known that independent departments like the Spirit Jade Hall and Welcoming Newcomer Pavilion, although they were nominally independent of the three great pavilions, in reality, the positions of these independent departments from top to bottom were uniformly appointed by the three great pavilions, and the personnel were also selected from within the three great pavilions. Moreover, they retained the right to conscript them at any time. In other words, whether it was Lu Bianren, the deputy pavilion master of the Welcoming Newcomer Pavilion, or Dai Wucheng, the steward of the Spirit Jade Hall, even if they were doing well outside, in the end, they were still people of Blue Cloud Pavilion. When the time limit was up, they would still be conscripted back by Blue Cloud Pavilion. And this Lu Bianren, no matter how down and out he was still the deputy pavilion master of the Welcoming Newcomer Pavilion. In the future, if he was transferred back to Blue Cloud Pavilion, he would inevitably be a person with real power. For Dai Wucheng, even if it was for his own future, it was absolutely not a bad thing to do the other party a favor at this time. But the problem was, this matter also involved Meng Jiuguang. Although Meng Jiuguang was now just a small steward of the Welcoming Newcomer Pavilion. In terms of status, he could not be compared with Lu Bianren. Moreover, Meng Jiuguang was also Lu Bianren's subordinate in the Welcoming Newcomer Pavilion. In this way, this choice did not seem difficult to make. But the key was, Lu Bianren's side was just a distant favor for Dai Wucheng, but Meng Jiuguang's side was related to his own interests. It was no exaggeration to say that the spirit jades that Dai Wucheng had accumulated in his hands now, 80% of them were obtained from Meng Jiuguang's side. Of course, this was all through shady channels. With Spirit Jade Hall's stringent supervision of spirit jades, if it wasn't for Meng Jiuguang, this smooth and slick fellow, Dai Wucheng wouldn't have any chance at all by himself. Even if he had the convenience of his position as the person in charge, it was absolutely impossible for him to get any bit of profit. If it was just to sell a favor to Lu Bianren, he would offend Meng Jiuguang and cut off his biggest source of income. This did not look like a wise choice no matter how one looked at it. It was just that on Lu Bianren's side, it was not good to rashly offend such a small character. Why? Is there a difficulty in this matter? Seeing that Dai Wucheng did not answer for a long time, Lu Bianren could not help frowning. In his view, this should be just a trivial matter. After all, he would not have thought that Dai Wucheng and Meng Jiuguang would have such a deep involvement. Dai Wucheng pondered for a moment, and finally made up his mind. He said with a wry smile, Pavilion Master Lu, logically speaking, since you have spoken, junior apprentice brother will definitely not have any objections. But to tell you the truth, recently our Spirit Jade Hall has been investigating this kind of matter very strictly. This matter is not easy to handle. Investigating very strictly? Lu Bianren was taken aback. If it was someone else, they might really be deceived by Dai Wucheng. But he had already heard senior apprentice brother Bitter describe the situation at that time. At this time, looking at Dai Wucheng's unnatural expression, he immediately understood in his heart. Lu Bianren thought for a while and said, Junior apprentice brother Dai, this matter concerns the development of newcomers. This matter is not only me begging you, but also for the consideration of our entire Blue Cloud Pavilion. Please be sure to help. I will remember today's favor in my heart. In the future, when I return to Blue Cloud Pavilion, there will be a repayment. Sigh, Pavilion Master Lu, aren't you making things difficult for me, junior apprentice brother? I also want to help, but I really dare not violate the rules of Spirit Jade Hall. Dai Wucheng had already made up his mind and refused to budge no matter what. Moreover, he has already signed the contract. If it is changed, without the introduction letter of your welcoming pavilion's head pavilion master, I can't do anything about it, and I can't explain it to the higher-ups. You also know that sometimes, only the chief pavilion master has the authority to coordinate these matters. Really can't help? Lu Bianren's face turned cold. This matter was originally not a troublesome matter. Moreover, no matter what, he had taken care of this Dai Wucheng in the past. Now that it had come to this, the other party was still making excuses. Even a clay figurine still had some temper. Moreover, this guy even brought up the chief pavilion master. Did he mean that his authority as a deputy pavilion master was not enough? I really can't help. Seeing the other party's face change, Dai Wucheng simply did not pretend and straightforwardly refused. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.